and it brings down all the places if you've been. That's what that does right there. If you change that to 0, it changes it to 0. You guys heard that story about the kid finding out what he got for Christmas because he went to his mom's browser, looked at the history and clicked on it and said, oh, look what mom's buying me from Amazon. It's because it sent it right back to him. That's so you can do that right there to mitigate that. Okay, next one. Okay, this is interesting. Now we're going to start talking a little bit about phishing and clicking on links and all that good stuff. So this guy right here created this website. If you look at the top there, it says apple.com. Does anybody believe that that's really apple.com? Okay, it's a trick question. Of course it's not. Anyways, what happens is in the URL there, how the browser, and I'm trying to make this right, views the Unicode that's in there. Some Unicode characters will come up as A, some will come up as P. If you can figure that out, I can hide behind that. So if you get a phishing email and it says, hey, click on apple.com, you need to reset your password or your cloud ID or whatever it is, and you go there, and then you see you got a green box, and you also got an apple.com. Most people think, yeah, that sounds legit. That's very possible. You can go to the next slide, and instead it's that right there. It's fake. So it's real easy to hide behind these things. Even if you go up and but you go put your cursor up on the URL and see that, you won't see it here. You'll see that apple.com. You'll still see that. So be very careful. And that's an old adage, too, about moving your cursor up over like in an email, seeing if it matches at both of them. Yeah, it might not match, but if it does, it still doesn't mean you're not going to get dinged. Because for about $10, I can go get my own email server, set it up on the internet, and create my own email, and it looks legit. And truly, it's not. So just be very careful. So when it comes to clicking on emails, I tell my folks never to do it unless you're 100% sure it's coming from and then it's legit. Because if you think about all the emails you get during the day, how many of them do you really need to click on? Very few. Very few. And that's probably the 80%, they say it's about 80% chance, not 80% chance, but 80% of all the hacks is through phishing emails. And the information that's about you guys online, I can grab that information and use that to create a phishing email myself. Most of them are pretty bad because they're coming from other countries. They don't know English very well. I'm not an English major. I don't know very well. But I can at least get it across to where it looks legit. A buddy of mine, I did a presentation for our CSOs in the Bureau this past May. And a friend of mine, he's up in Portland. And I said, hey, Pat, can I get your name? Of course, I knew his name, but I said, I'm going to use you as an example. He goes, yeah, go for it. So I took his name in Portland, which is where he lives, in that general area. He doesn't actually live in Portland. And within 15 minutes, I had a picture of his house. I had his wife's name and his kids' names. And then from there, it could have just gone from there. That's how much information, and that's just free information. That's not stuff if I would decide to pay like LexisNexis. I can create my own company, give them whatever it is to access their database, and I'm off to the races. And I can use that information to create a phishing email and attack particular companies. There's one other company I helped out a while back. They had all their people's pictures on their front page, on their web page, their phone numbers and email addresses. Do you really need that information out there for the public to see? I mean, you may need it, you may not. They took it down after I gave them a presentation. But their organization, they had to be very careful because of what information they had. And given the attacker that ease of that, it's not good. It's not good at all. Okay, next one. So Tor. Anybody ever use Tor? Yeah, a little bit, few folks. It's really good. It really, really protects your privacy. Does it work on every site? No, it doesn't. But there's some things you can do with that to make it work. But if you want to keep yourself safe and not have anybody look at what you have, Tor's a good application to use for that. Is it bad? Yeah, there's some bad things out there. Absolutely. But you're going to have to want to go get the bad things. If you're just using it to do some searching online, works perfect. If you want to do some searching online when you're on one of those open internet connections, at the airport, at the coffee shop, on the airplane, perfect. You don't have to worry about anybody looking at your stuff and figuring out who you are. Okay, next slide. EXIF data. I put this up here just kind of give you guys an idea. Has anybody ever heard of it before? It's the information that's on your photos. Years ago, it would be on your those nice little Nikon cameras. The 35 millimeter gives you a little f-stop and exposure and all that good stuff. Well, nowadays, if you use your smartphone, it's your GPS location. So I can get your photo, I can get your GPS location and find out a little bit more about you. It's really good. I go back to the kids thing again. Hey, I'm over at Johnny's house and just posted something online. Well, let me pull that photo. Oh, you're not at Johnny's house, you're at Steve's house. Why'd you lie to me? Get it on Google right here. I'm going to go on Google Maps. So it's just all that information that's out there. It all depends. You know, you may want to put it out there, you may not. But the thing about it is you understand that it's out there, so you can better manage it. If you know what's out there, if you know what's going on, you can manage it much better, and you can secure it much better. Next slide. VPNs. Anybody use VPNs? Really, really good. I highly recommend VPNs, especially if you're doing sensitive stuff on an open network. You want that information encrypted. If you go to the, like I said, the coffee shop or you're at the airport, something like that, oh, I got to go to my bank real quick, and you're not using a VPN, if that information is not encrypted and some bad guy's on there, he's going to see it. It's going to be plain as day. I'll have a little, and I'll show you here in a second, but I'll put a packet sniffer on there, and I'll watch everything that goes by, everything. I'll know where you're going, which IP address you're going to, and I'll know where you're coming from. I'll get your MAC address. I might even get your device, what device you have. So be very, very careful. VPNs are very good for protecting your information. Just be real cognizant of which ones you get. There are some out there that are not that good. Do a little research on them. I do not recommend using any of the free ones. There are some free ones out there that you can use. They're just not, they're not that good. You're just kind of false sense of security with those ones. So just be very careful. This DNS leak test is a really good website to go to see if your VPN is leaking your IP address. See if any information is being leaked off of it. Works out really good. And if you really want to get crazy, you can put two different VPNs, one on a host machine and one on a guest machine if you use like a VM or something like that. So now you're tunneling through different ones and you're really protecting yourself there. But that's, if you want to sell secrets, then that might be a good one to do. But if not, you're probably going too far. Okay, next one. Running processes. This is another good one that you can use yourself to find out what's going on in your own device. Okay? If you do get malware on there, it's got to run somewhere. It's got to do something, and your computer is going to see that. So you get Process Explorer from Windows. On a Mac, it's Active Monitor, or you can even use NetStat. Do a little command in your terminal or your command box, and it'll spit out everything that's running on your computer. I did this once at one of our defense contractors, the computers they had, and it was supposed to be just a little old computer doing nothing. That computer was doing a lot of stuff for some reason. I don't know why, but there was a lot. I said, you guys, I'm not touching that one anymore. I mean, there was like 15 IP addresses on there that was talking to. There was a whole bunch of processes running in the background, and I asked the guy, I was like, is that right? And he's like, nope, we're going to look at that after you leave. So it will show you stuff. It will show you stuff on your own device. You can do this yourself and see what's going on. Down here at the bottom, I got Wireshark and EtherApe. Both of those, EtherApe is a little bit easier to visualize. I took some of that stuff off here because I only had a short period of time, but it kind of gives you an idea of who your computer's talking to, and it kind of gives you little lines of the IP addresses. Wireshark is going to be a packet sniffer. That's going to show you all the information that's going back and forth on your device, who it's talking to. I'm going to hit the next one. So here it is right here. Here's a screenshot. And you can see the source IP address, the destination IP address, and down here I clicked on one of the packets, that was going through, and I got the name of the computer. So if you guys ever name your computer, like this person did, which was Melissa PC, and you're trying to protect your privacy a little bit, and you're going to one of these open internet connections, one of the wireless access points, and I'm on there, and I'm like, hey, who's this Melissa? I don't know. I have no idea. There's a whole bunch of people in here. Melissa, your coffee's ready. Oh, okay, that's Melissa. Okay, what is she doing? What is she looking at? If that information that you're transmitting across that network is unencrypted, there it is right down there. I'll see it right down there. I'll be able to see it. And also, if you connect to my rogue access point, anybody heard of those before? Okay, I set up my own access point. You're going to come through my computer before you get on the internet. You're going to use my SSL certificate that I stole from somebody else. And I'm going to decrypt all your information. I'll get your bank account information, your passwords, all that good stuff. So just be very careful. Now, if I have a VPN, is that going to work? Nope. It'll pass right on through. Okay, next slide. Encryption. How many people here use encryption? Everybody should raise their hand. Everybody should use it. If you want to protect your stuff, you've got to use encryption. There's no two ways around it. File Vault and BitLocker are the two for Windows and Macs. If you don't use those two right there, and you lose your device, your Windows machine or your Mac machine, it'll take me about 30 seconds to break your 26-character password because it's the way it saves it. It's a little tool called Trinity Rescue Kit. I've used it before on our devices when people forget. We have a lot of people moving around, and they forget their passwords, and we still want to use the device. I'll just slap that CD in there, run it up, and I'm back in the system. And I'll change the password, and we're back in business. But the good guys do it, so can the bad guys. Okay? Veracrypt is really good. Some of the other companies out there that make it, usually for a cost, use about 70, 80 bucks or so, full disk encryption. But definitely, if you have sensitive information and you want to protect it, please use encryption. Definitely do it. Okay, next slide. Encrypted communications. You guys ever use any IM, talk back and forth, do any kind of business back and forth? You ever go overseas and have to talk back to the company? I can tell you guys, if you go overseas, and depending on which country you go to, they're watching you. They want to know your information. They want to know what's going on in your business, especially if you're doing business over there. They want to know it. I mean, there's no two ways around it. They want to know what's going on. And some of these ones you can use. Ricochet is an end-to-end IM, and it uses the Tor network. It's all encrypted. It uses Tor network. It's a little hard to use because of the handles that you get. It's made up. It's not something easy you can remember, so you'd have to write it down. You've heard of Signal. Thema's a few other ones. AS Text Encrypt, that's a text encrypt. You can encrypt some text, send it in an email, so somebody can see it. And of course, Wicker is another IM that you can put on your phone and also on your device. But if you guys are wanting to communicate back and forth to your home agency and you're someplace where you're worried about that kind of information, kind of sensitive proprietary information or business information, you probably want to use some kind of encrypted tool to do that. Okay, next one. Malware, you name them all. Viruses, Trojans, rootkits, worms, spyware, everywhere. It's all out there. For malware to be successful and for an attacker to be successful with their malware, there's a couple of things that need to occur. Okay? I'm going to need physical access to the device so I can get something on there. I need you to do something. Click on a link, click on an attachment. Okay? Or some of the other ones, if you have a forward-facing server or something like that on the internet, of course, there's a whole bunch of different things you need to do with that. But that's really the only way I'm getting onto your device. I can write the biggest and baddest malware ever that's out there. But until I get it on your device, it's just a bunch of ones and zeros. So it goes right back to the user. It's back to the user, clicking on the links, opening up the attachments, you know, doing that, hey, check out this joke or check out this website. No, don't. Just don't do it, especially if you're at work. Because that device is connected to your network at your office. You may have some really sensitive information on there. And when you do something like that, somebody's in. Now, there's one thing to remember, and this is what I've told my folks too. If you do happen to click on a link, tell somebody. Tell somebody that you did it. Because even as an attacker, maybe I did get into your system, but I got to look around now. I don't know what's there. I don't know what I'm looking for. I got to start snooping around a little bit, and it's going to take a little bit of time to do that. Well, if you know that I'm there, then maybe you can mitigate it. No different than somebody breaking into your house. Yeah, they broke into your front door. They're in your house. Now what? You don't leave all your valuables sitting right there. They're all hidden everywhere. You're in a safe or something like that. Same thing on a network. I'm going to have to go through that network to find out where everything is at. So if somebody would say something, you might be able to mitigate it. Okay, next one. So just definitely put some kind of antivirus applications on your devices. They're not 100%. I've heard numbers between 20 to 40%, some as high as 50% with antivirus. The thing about antiviruses are they're only as good as the signatures that they get. So it has to be out there. The companies have to find them. They have to write the signatures for them. You know, the MD5 hashes or whatever they want to use, but they have to have those. Hackers know that, so they're going to change that around a little bit. They're going to get right past antivirus. So it's not 100%, but it's better than having nothing at all. Keep your applications up to date. Your operating system, all your other applications, keep those up to date. I know sometimes that can be difficult depending if you're on a production network or not, that you're worried about that new patch or that new update that might mess everything up. Try to do your best because there's a lot of vulnerabilities out there, and those patches will update those and you don't have to worry about them. You can ask a couple companies about those particular vulnerabilities that they didn't patch and what happened. I'm not going to go into that, but you guys, I'm sure you'll know. Objective-C, if you guys have Mac, that's a really cool website. The guy's a former NSA guy, and he creates a bunch of really cool apps to secure your Mac. Really, really interesting stuff. Okay, next slide. Logs. Those logs will tell you a lot of stuff that's going on in your network. It's the first thing that we ask for when we come out to an incident to a company. Where's your logs? We need to see those logs because that's going to tell you everything that's happened, what's going on. Your computers love to create logs. So if you ever go into them and you see about 5 hours missing of information, you got a problem. I can guarantee you got a problem. But keep those logs. You can even look at your logs at your own device and see what's going on your own device. It'll tell you stuff. You just got to know how to look at them. Next slide. So here I just opened up Firefox, and you can see there's an opening there for it right there. And then next slide. And then there it is again, Mozilla.org. Just opened up. You just got to know to look for it. It's hard. It is. But the information is there. You just got to find it. Okay. Next one. Your camera and microphone. Anybody put tape over their camera? Yeah, there's one, two, a couple of people. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, if you need it, just take it off. You can take the tape off. That's fine. But for the most part, all my computers, I'll tape every one of them. And I even take a little magic marker and put a black dot on it just to make sure. That's how paranoid I am. That's my job, though, so it's okay. But that's the only thing you can really do. I mean, physically putting it over there, because even if you don't do that, and maybe you might hand a virus on there, well, if I got some good malware on there, I'll just sneak around that. I'll turn your camera on, and here I am, I'm watching everything you're doing. Turn on your microphone. Hear all your sound and stuff. You know, getting back to updating your information, I think it was last year when, was it last year? Maybe it might have been a year before last, when Apple just sent out an update to their iPhones and whatnot, iOS. And it was probably about maybe 3 or 4 months later they sent out another one. Does anybody know why? There was a dissident in Saudi Arabia that received a text message. He looked at it and said, I probably shouldn't click on that link. It's probably not a good idea. Gave it to his buddy who was a security researcher. Well, they checked it out, found out that there was a bug, a 0-day for the iOS. They gave it to Apple, and within a couple of weeks they sent out a patch for it. If he would have clicked on that link, the adversary would have been able to see everything in his phone. Contacts, text messages, listen to his phone calls, emails, the whole 9 yards, seen everything. There was an issue with VirtualBox last week. Have you guys ever used VirtualBox? Not for a VM. But there was a 0-day that some security researcher sent it to Oracle. And what it was is in the networking part of it, you can have bridge or NAT on your network. So if you can have network address translation from your own host machine, which will change it over to that 192 or 10 or whatever like that, or bridge where you can just grab it from the wireless access point or whatever you're using for your internet connection. Well, if you had it in NAT, malware can jump between the host machine and the guest machine. 2 days later, VirtualBox came out with a fix for it. So it's really nice. So that's why updating and patching your applications is so important for things like that. Yeah, and then as far as the sound goes, you can just move it. The only thing you can do on a Mac is move the slide over to turn off your microphone and stuff. So, right, next slide. Firewall, make sure you turn your firewalls on your devices on your machines. Having all those ports open up, all those communication ports leaves yourself open for compromise. So turn all that stuff on. Mac, you can do it real easy, and so the Windows, just turn it right on. You can set up some rules if you want to, if you really want to get crazy with it. For the most part, you really only need a couple of ports open on your device to communicate out on the internet. Okay, next one. Sharing. Does anybody share their information from their devices? I'm using this right here is on a Mac. Windows does the same thing. A colleague of mine, when he was in the Army years ago, they used to go, when they were traveling in the airport, they would open up their devices and listen to other people's music because they would have their sharing for all Mac. Macs love to talk, if you guys didn't know that. Windows likes to do it too, but for some reason, Macs does it much, much better. Not that it's a bad thing, because you might want to do that. It depends. It depends on your operation, what's going on. But if you have sensitive files on your device, do you really want to share that with somebody else? You know, it's just something to think about. Okay, next slide. Administrative and user accounts. Have some user accounts for your device, especially ones at home. A lot of malware needs administrative rights to work. I know even when I attack a machine or doing something, the first thing I need to escalate those privileges. When I first attack it, I may not have administrative rights, so I'm going to have to bounce around a little bit, do some other things to get those administrative rights. Just have your user account, especially even for your kids. It's really good because you don't have to worry about them downloading applications or programs from the internet and then getting all kinds of viruses and stuff because they can't open them up. They won't work. How many guys use, how many people have Apple phones? Quite a few. Android phones? How many people use PIN codes to get into them? A lot of folks, okay. 4 digits? Anybody use 4 digits? Yes? Okay. We'll talk about that here in a second, so we're going to circle back with the password stuff. Think about your PIN code that you have right now. Is each digit different from each other? 4 different digits. Okay? If they are, and you use that digit once for each one of those pins, how many possible combinations is there for me to hack your phone? 10,000. No. Because you're only using 4 different ones for each one. But there are 10,000 possibilities, yes. 000999. But if you use 4 different digits, different for each one, 24 combinations. Because the first digit, I got a 1 in 4 chance, 3, 2, and the last one is 1. Okay? How many people have put that PIN code in there when you're looking at your keypad when you go left to right, top to bottom? Because that's how we read, left to right, top to bottom. How many people look at their phone and stare at the fingerprints that are on it? Now I'm really in, because now I know your digits. Okay? That's how easy it is to get into a phone. I always play Candy Crush, so I mess mine all up so we can see it. But that's just a simple little hack. I showed that to my wife last year. She went to school and showed her kids, a bunch of 5th graders. She came home the next day. Half the class got into their parents' phones. I created a bunch of little hackers. But that's just, I mean, that's how simple. People think, you know, hacking, yes, it is, especially if you know code. You can really create some really cool stuff. But a lot of it is psychology. A lot of it's social engineering. If you're a good social engineer, you're a good hacker. There's plenty of tools online that you can get for free that even our adversaries are using. They're not even creating their own new stuff because they want to be like everybody else. If I look like everybody else in the crowd, no one's going to stare at me. No one's going to know it's me. Okay, next one. So here's a little hacker post. Kind of true. I'm not picking on any secretaries or anything like that. But it goes across the board for anybody. You know, if I sent, I'm going to have people in here, maybe 75 people. If I send an email to each one of you that had a link on it, how many of you would click on it? Yeah. Now you won't. But before, think about it. It only takes one. That's all it takes is one. And the bigger organization you have, the harder it is. Because you have to train everybody. And everybody learns differently. Okay? People like visual. Some people like kinesthetics, working with their hands and stuff like that. You know, I can sit there and even our training, we do ours once a year, our InfoSec training once a year. And when everybody say, oh, I don't want to do it. Oh, I'm sick and tired of sitting in front of the computer. You think that's effective? Not really. But when I do my training, I'll go through all this stuff. I'll do some hands-on things. I'll kind of give them some ideas, show them what can happen. It clicks in much better. It does. It really does. We had, I think, let's see, in the past, since I've been the CSO, one person clicked on a link on our unclassified side, and it was malicious. Luckily enough, what you do, she picked up the phone and called somebody. I was their second call. The first call was back at our headquarters unit back in D.C., and they stopped it. But you called somebody. Okay? It's going to happen. We had somebody, it was about 2 months ago, just wake up out of bed, their phone rings. Oh, God, I got to get this. What is it? What's going on? It's an email. And she's reading the email and it says it's from Director Ray. That was her first mistake because the director's not going to email any of us. But she was half asleep. What'd she do? She clicked on the link. Our system caught it, no big deal. But she did call somebody afterwards. Matter of fact, she called me at 6:45 in the morning. I was getting kids ready to go to school, and the phone's ringing. I'm like, what? Oh, you're fine. Don't worry about it. It'll be good. You know. But she said something. You know, that's all that matters. People are going to do things. We're people. We make mistakes. There's no two ways around it. It's going to happen. But if you can minimize as much as you can, understand what's going on, you're going to be in much better shape to defend against it. Okay? Next slide. Phishing emails, like I said, tell somebody. That's it. If you happen to click on it, tell them. Tell your IT person, tell your supervisor. You can really help somebody out by doing that. Help an organization out by doing that. Okay? Next one. This is actual email, phishing email I got. No, I didn't get. One of my employees got. But you can see, first one right there, treasury.gov.org. What's that? That's not even true. I can tell you this right there. IRS is not going to send you an email for money. We're not going to send you an email saying that you're under investigation. It's not going to happen. Never. One, you may not know you're under investigation, but if you are under investigation, we're going to come tell you. We're going to knock on your door and tell you. Because you're not going to see this. And people fall for it all the time. I remember when I grew up in Florida, and we'd always hear about the Nigerians sending mail to all of our senior citizens, and they're sending their money over there. Same exact stuff, except now they're using the internet. And they can send out a lot more emails because why? We give our email addresses out to everybody. Okay? Benefits should, a resident if. Like I said, I'm not really good at grammar. I got to have somebody always look at my stuff just to make sure. But I can pick that out. See, that's not right. Next slide. No phone number. Or if there is a phone number, it just rings and rings and rings. You know, if somebody's emailing you for information, they want something, don't give it to them. There's no reason to. The only time you really need to do that is if you're doing something already. You're doing a business transaction. Say you're buying a home, you're buying a car, or something like that. You are going to get some emails back and forth and stuff. But if you just get one out of the blue, never, ever, ever give your password to somebody. Unless they got a gun to your head, and you got bigger problems. But no, don't do it. There's no reason to. Your credentials, never, ever give it out, especially if somebody emails you for them. But people do it all the time. You know, Google is not going to send you an email and put the username and password in there and tell them that your email account has been compromised to go ahead and log in right there. They're not going to do that. Okay? So don't fall for it. Okay, next one. Bam. Oh, good. I got some time for questions. Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
This may be obvious, but I don't know. But cut and paste, it says click, but you cut and paste it and then see it.
You'll still get dinged. Because all you're doing, you're copying and pasting the link. You're not just the text. You're doing everything. So yeah, that will still get you too. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Can you update on what security's taking effect as far as like all our public data used to be where you have to go to the courthouse and get the public data, like where people live. Now you can go to map servers
Yeah.
online
Yeah.
and check out where people live or who bought the house down the road from you. So are there anything, guidelines or things in place that's going to start securing that privacy?
That is something you're going to have to talk to the counties about and the states about. That's always been my kind of thorn from personal, not from the FBI, from personal. Yeah, that's public information. Does the world need to know about it? That would be my question. If you want to know where I live and how much I pay for my house, drive on down to the courthouse and go look at it. It's too easy for anybody in the world to go online and do that. It's too easy for somebody that's stalking somebody.
That's what I was going to bring up.
Exactly. Everything is out there. Everything is out there. And that's the sad thing. That's why you got to be worried about it. Okay.
So that would start from a state level.
Yeah, that's going to be our legislators doing that, deciding whether or not that information should be posted online or not. Okay. There's a whole bunch. Just keep your hands raised and I'll just come back. So I'll start over here.
Will you make this PowerPoint available to whoever here so we can get a copy?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I can do that. Just, matter of fact, oh, it's not up here. But yeah, just get with the folks at, is it Enterprise ETS? You want to do it?
What should we use? If you just want to send it to me, Mike.
Okay,
try
before I
and
leave, I'll get
we'll
your
try and
email
make it
address.
available on the WildGov.
Okay. And this
website
is a very, this is, like I said, normally it's like 6 hours. I have like 70 slides and I cut it down to like 40 and I went really quick with my stuff. So there's a lot more to this stuff, just to let you know. So, okay. Yes, sir.
Okay, I have a question about the Intel chip, and how is that secured? And, you know, I know that was a real big deal when the i7 or whatever, the latest Intel chip, that there was some vulnerability in it. And how does that impact us?
It impacts you, one, if your adversary gets physical access to your device, and second, clicking on links and downloading the malware and stuff like that. If you don't do those kind of things, your risk is very low. Yeah, is it a possibility? Is there a vulnerability? Yes. Are they working on it? Yes. Are you going to like the fix? Maybe not, it depends. I've heard different stories about it slows it down, does this, does that. They'll finally get it figured out. But when it comes to things like that, as far as the user is concerned, your risk is very low, okay? If you don't click on any links or don't any malware, none of that stuff, it's very, very low. Now, if you have a company and, you know, say one of our adversaries are coming after you because you have some really sensitive information, yeah, then that might be an issue. But then again, they're way overseas. They got to get that information on, they got to get that malware on your computer, and that comes back to the user. That makes sense? Okay.
A lot of people store their data in the cloud now, not necessarily on a device. Do you have any thoughts on the relative security differences between storing data on the cloud, like for example in Google Drive,
Right.
versus keeping files on your computer?
Okay. I'm going to tell you the Mike Mercer answer. I don't store any of my stuff on any place other than what I have. Because when I do that, I'm giving up that authority to them to protect. If I mess up, then it's on me. You know, how many other attacks have been out there where our information has been compromised? You know, it's because they didn't do due diligence. So yeah, I mean, it's up to you. It's a personal decision. It's not 100%, but when you give it up to somebody else, you're giving it up to them to protect, and not you.
Does the FBI publish any documents on every operating system, versions of Linux, Windows, Mac, Haiku, everything out there as far as how hardened they are and what the best options are for each operating system?
No, the FBI does not do that. But what you can do is go to, I believe it's NIST.gov, National Institute of Science and Technology. They produce a whole bunch of really cool stuff of hardening your OS. You can check with them. I think it's NIST.gov, and you can look at that. Matter of fact, I get some of the stuff I get, I always look at their stuff first to make sure that I'm on the right track, because they do a lot of good stuff with that. Okay. Anybody else? Oh, one more.
I know you're not part of the judiciary branch of the government,
No.
but when is the government going to start prosecuting people who give away our data without us knowing it, like Equifax? People we don't have any choice but give data to, or we won't have a credit report. Do you get any kind of sense at the government level when they're going to get serious about taking our data seriously? I mean, we can do as much as we can to protect it on our own computers and in the cloud, but if these other companies are going to give it away and not get in trouble, it's crazy.
It goes back to the legislators. That's their job to make those laws. It's our job as citizens to voice our opinion on that. No, the only thing when we get involved is after the fact, when something's bad happened. You know, it's nice to come out here and talk to you guys before something's happened, because if our agents show up at your business, then you know something is bad happened. You know, so yeah, it's legislation. That's all there is to it. I can't. Yeah, unfortunately, there's nothing I can say. Yep. Yes, sir.
What sort of trends are you seeing right now with attacks on businesses around Wyoming and region? In the past was ransomware, but that's kind of died down a bit.
Yeah, there's nothing, I don't have anything specific for Wyoming, but even the region, you know, in our region here in Colorado, there's a lot of defense contractors, a lot of startups, a lot of companies that are doing a lot of really neat stuff. The adversaries are scanning all the time. That's just the way it is. And it's not so much, you know, cyber criminals. It could be, you know, nation states. It could be the kid down the street that just wants to mess around. It's the wild, wild west on the internet. And everybody's scanning everything, and they're looking for a hole. And it's hard to determine whether or not somebody's looking at you, because we don't know, you know. But I can tell you this, if you have information or you're using something that's out there that nobody else has, and you're putting it out on the internet, hey, this is my great little widget I got, and I'm doing all this really cool stuff with, you know, the military and stuff, I can guarantee you someone's just waiting, because they want that information. Now, there was a question, or actually I was watching a presentation, and the presenter said something about when is hacking going to stop? Okay? When it's not monetary for them to do it, or when it's not political, or really, I think it's more information than anything else, because information is where it's at. The more information you have on somebody or something or some country, you're going to be at a much higher level than they are, because you know what they know, and they don't know that you know it. You know, that's the whole back and forth thing. You know, so yeah, it's not going to stop. You just have to protect yourself. Yes, sir.
I work with a nonprofit that provides cybersecurity help to small businesses and nonprofits and small government agencies. And there's a national study done by the Ponymont Institute, which earlier this year showed that Wyoming had the second worst cyber hygiene in the nation. So there's a lot of work to be done in the state. And what we're finding is that people are afraid to even ask the questions. But once they find out what they can do themselves, empower them, like things that you were showing today, their attitude turns around when they find out that they can work with their ISPs and their local tech people, their lawyers, insurance agents, others who can help them with enhance their cybersecurity. That turns around. It's, you know, it's the idea of burying your head in the sand, thinking, well, I'm in Wyoming, who cares about what I do in Wyoming? But if you're on the internet, you could be in Antarctica. It doesn't make any difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's really education. It's about culture. It's about taking control of your information. Anybody here, and ladies, you don't have to raise your hands, graduate high school back in the 80s? I remember when I was in Florida, there was one class that I had to pass before I graduated. It was about communism. They don't teach that anymore. Do they teach anything about cybersecurity in schools now? Is that something our kids and our college students should know? Absolutely. Because that's life. Especially with the Internet of Things now. That's even more devices gathering information on you. We should have some type of education for everybody. Because the more you know, the better off you're going to be. Okay, I think we got one more question, and I'm going to have to cut it because I don't want to cut into the next person's time.
Would your agency be the agency to help develop that curriculum?
I don't think, the FBI, that's not the FBI's job. Unfortunately, we're here as an agency to, investigate crimes. Could we help? Absolutely. But there's a lot of information out on the internet that you just have to go grab. I mean, it's all there. I mean, that's a lot of the stuff, that's where I've gotten my stuff. I mean, I use some of my experience, basing it off what I've seen on the internet and say, okay, does that really work? Well, yes, it will work. You know, that kind of thing. Everything is out there for you to get. All the information is there. You just got to go find it and stuff. All righty. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mercer. We certainly appreciate your advice and information concerning cybersecurity. It would not be us if we didn't add a cybersecurity element into a IT-centric conference. So. With that said, we're going to continue on our agenda. We'll have a break here at 2:30, so if you could bear with us for just a little bit longer. Next up is the topic, Reshaping Wyoming's High-Speed Wireless Infrastructure for Next-Generation Internet Services. And today we have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Cheryl Riley. Cheryl heads AT&T's external and legislative affairs for the Northern Plains states, a region that includes South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Iowa. She is a native of Casper, Wyoming, and earned her undergraduate and graduate degrees from the University of Wyoming. Cheryl has been with AT&T for the past 12 years. Please join me in welcoming Cheryl to the stage.
Okay, that is hard to follow because I'm up here to talk about how much time we spend on these, and now I'm terrified. So I don't want to. I was just thinking, as he was speaking, about all the stuff that I did today on this phone, and oh yikes! And I'm going to go home promptly and collect all my devices from my children. So anyway, thank you. That is seriously hard to follow with this presentation after that one. So. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. I'm here to talk about the need for us to get to next generation internet services and why. And this is such an exciting time in the technology business, in the telecom world. I'm looking around, I see a lot of my colleagues, and we know what's going on in the market, and it's really a fascinating time right now. And it's fun to be part of it. So I just really appreciate having the opportunity to talk a little bit about that today. So next slide, please. I like when I don't have to do the clicker because I always forget. So anyway, this is great. So when I talk about next generation internet services, we all think of 5G, of course, and I know that that's what this talk will culminate to, is talking about 5G. But getting there will be an evolution. It's not just flip a switch and we all have 5G and cool, we get to download movies super fast. It's really an evolution, and we're well into that evolution. Maybe revolution, I don't know, maybe that's a good word too, but we're in that process right now. But I need to step back and set the stage on why. Why do we need this super fast, super reliable, always on connectivity? Why do we need that? And it's because we are, mobile broadband is playing such an important role in our life. We're just connected to these all the time. It's really interesting. I look around, because that's my world, I look around at various functions that I'm at, and I'm always seeing people doing this all the time. And it's just interesting that we can't go without it anymore. And I find myself doing that too. Even watching TV, it's like, I gotta know what's going on People magazine, what's going on. It's just really an interesting world. It's all access all the time, but it's really changing how industry is addressing that. So we're all using our smartphones. Do we use them to talk anymore? I can't remember the last time I made a call on this thing, honestly. But we're sending emails, we're video chatting while we're walking to work, we're posting to social networks, we're streaming music, we're watching movies, we're managing our business operations. I bank on this thing, which is so cool, but now I'm scared to do that, so we might rethink that. But I mean, it's all the things that we can do on these smartphones now, it's incredible. But it's changing the way that the networks operate, and so obviously changing what the carriers have to do to keep up with that. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about my first hour of the day today, because I was thinking about this as I walked in here this morning. So I'm on the road So first thing I do is I video chat with my kids, make sure everybody's up, because it's always a stressful thing when mom's not home. So make sure everybody's getting up and going to school. So I got a video chat, everybody's alive, so that's good to go. And then I online registered my 2 boys for baseball camp. So I did that real quick. That took about 10 minutes, but was able to get that done. Then I checked their school schedules. Did notice there was a missing assignment from the 7th grader, so that prompted an email to the teacher and a very terse text message to my son. So, they love that I know what's going on all the time. They don't like that so much, but. And then, excuse me. Sorry, I just choked on my water. Then I watched a video while I was working out, all in an hour. So think about the data that I just went through in that hour. But I was very efficient, so it was awesome. There's 400 million connected devices in the US right now. We have a population of about 325 million. Do the math, it's about 1.2 million devices per person. So, and just think about your own household, how many connected devices you have. And that is gonna change. I know the last presenter talked about the Internet of Things. Once we connect our refrigerators, and we connect our lights, and we connect everything else that we're gonna connect, that number is gonna go up exponentially. So, but all the connected devices that we have on the network currently. Think about how many you have in your own home. We have phones, we have tablets, we have smartwatches, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's an amazing trend in our world, how many devices that you have. So just, take a minute and think about that. Oh, and I'm not keeping up. Sorry, see, can you, I'm one behind. There you go. Now you can change it again, sorry. The other thing, and I look at my friend, Kristen, over half of Americans no longer have landlines. So even more traffic on these phones. I haven't had a landline. I was thinking about that. 2005 maybe is the last time. And I'm sorry, Kristen, I love CenturyLink, but I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. But it's just reality. It's a massive change in the market that we don't have our landlines. So we are depending more and more on these things. So next slide, please. So this is just a look at AT&T's network, because I can't talk to the other carriers' networks, but just our network alone. The data usage has increased 360,000%. I can't even get my mind around that. What does that mean? And that's since 2007, and I think that's 2017 numbers. I can imagine in 2018 and heading into 2019, those numbers are even way, way higher. So that's what keeps our engineers up at night. How do we handle all that traffic? It's like a highway, all the lanes of traffic. If you're driving to Denver a lot and you know the areas that can get congested, it's exactly the same thing on a wireless network. We're not talking, it's all about data. It's all about data. Videos, streaming videos, sending funny YouTube videos to my kids. That's how I connect with them. Exploring the internet. It's all about data. I don't call anymore. But that traffic is just putting a huge burden on the traffic. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's some numbers that I just don't even understand, but I'm going to try to talk through this. So global mobile traffic has grown 63% since 2016. So global mobile data traffic reached 7.2 exabytes per month at the end of 2016. What is an exabyte, you ask? That is equivalent to 1 billion. 1 exabyte is equal to 1 billion gigabytes. So as a comparison, the mobile networks carried 400 petabytes per month in 2011. Okay, so a petabyte is 1,000, or a exabyte is see, I've already lost you. It's a lot of data. It's just a lot of data. Okay, pexabyte, exabytes, whatever. It is a lot of data. Okay, it's a lot, an exa, pecta, whatever. So, and then, and interestingly, 60% of that from the mobile is videos. So we're all watching a lot of videos. I'm trying to wonder, like, when do we get things done? Which, if you go to the next slide, this shows how many hours per day we are all on our mobile devices. how do we get anything done? How are we getting anything done? But it's constant. There's no downtime. If you have downtime, what do? You pick up your phone and you get the latest news, or you watch the latest video, or whatever. We're always on our phones. We're always on our phones. As we like to say in the industry, no trivia question goes unanswered now. How many times you're looking at an actor and you're like, oh, what was he in? I know that. So you go Google his name, yeah, boom, I know it right then and there, and I'm the smartest person in the world. But we can't let those things go unanswered anymore. We have to know instantly. That's why we have to have our phone next to us when we're watching a movie, even if it's on TV. Next slide, please. I'll try not to choke on my water this time. So all the time we're spending on our phones, now we expect it to be fast and getting faster, faster, and more reliable. So data speeds are increasing on average as well. Obviously, it's a consumer-driven issue. The more we're on, the more we want to do, the more we do, the more we even want to do more, and it better be fast, and it better always work. So it's very consumer-driven. The more, if we're watching a movie, the next time we watch a movie and we download it, boy, it better be faster. Okay, it's just expectations are there that everything's more faster, more reliable, and it better be reliable because you don't want to, lose that YouTube video because, oh gosh, that would be just devastating. So we want instant access all the time. Think about the tremendous pressure that's putting on all the networks, not just AT&T's, but all the carriers' networks, because we all have phones and we're all using them all the time. Next slide, please. So in 2018, this year, smartphone data will surpass, the amount of smartphone data will surpass fixed broadband. Isn't that crazy? So we're doing more on our smartphones data-wise than we are on our fixed broadband connections. So, next slide, please. And believe it or not, it's not just for watching funny YouTube videos. We're actually using the way to contact 911. 80% of 911 calls are now made from wireless devices. And as we transition into next generation 911, people will be able to send text messages and videos to 911 centers, which is going to be a great thing for all of us. It's going to just imagine how that's going to help first responders to understand a situation that's going on in a home or an accident on the highway. They can understand what's going on because there are videos being sent. But again, a tremendous, tremendous amount of pressure on the network. Next slide, please. And this slide, I just really think it's cool. Our phones, this phone, has more computing power in it than the Apollo spacecraft landing on the moon. That's hard to even imagine. I don't really have anything cool to say about that because it's supposed to kind of just be cool on its own, but isn't that amazing? I mean, I'm amazed. You guys are, I don't know, maybe you're not, but I think that's pretty awesome. Next slide, please. Okay, so all of this increased traffic is causing traffic jams. So how do we deal with that? The industry needs to create more lanes to accommodate this massive amount of data traffic. So how do we do that? Small cells will play and are playing a very important role as we transition to next generation services. It's going to allow for faster speeds, more reliability, and very importantly, more lanes of traffic on our networks. Small cells, and you can see a little picture. They're generally on light poles or traffic poles, and they're just little pieces of equipment, as you can see. I mean, I don't have a realistic, just the cartoon one, but that's basically the size and where they're located and what they look like. But they're very flexible. They're very targeted network components that can readily address specific coverage and capacity issues. They generally work well in heavily populated areas like a sports arena, or if there's a downtown area that gets a lot of congestion on certain times of the day or night. Universities are hot spots for small cells because there's a lot of users, and particularly those kind of users are using a lot of data. So these are really like pinpointed network enhancements that can be very, very flexible, but really, really enhance our network and our ability to handle all of that traffic going on. In the first stage of development, small cells will provide a better, faster, more reliable LTE, long-term evolution experience, but more importantly, they're the building blocks as we move into next generation services like 5G. Now keep in mind, just because a community has small cells doesn't mean you automatically have 5G. And I think that's sort of a misnomer. It's like, oh, we have 5G, yay, we have small cells, yay, we have 5G. That's not the way it works. There's an evolution, but a very important part of that evolution is to get those targeted, very flexible, directional small cells in place to help with what's coming behind it with the evolution into 5G. Next slide, please. So, and this all leads to talking about 5G. What is it? Sounds like really cool. What is that? It's like space stuff and really neat, fun things. So just talk a little bit about what 5G actually means. I think it's pretty understood that 5G will be more than just the usual generational change. You know, we have we had 1G, our flip phones, that transitioned to 2G. Our flip phones that we sort of could send text messages with, but it wasn't very fun. You're like, It was not very user-friendly, so we didn't really use it. And then the big transition to 3G, where we could text and do a little bit of video, and then, of course, 4G and 4G LTE, which is what we mostly have now, and all the great computing things that you can do and all the opportunities that you have with 4G LTE. So, but I think we're going to see with 5G, it's not going to be just that small transition from 4G LTE to 5G. I think this is going to be something that we can't even wrap our minds around right now, to be honest. I can give you a little snapshot of what I think it's going to look like, but just think about all the applications that were developed as soon as we got 4G and 4G LTE. All the new apps out there. I mean, it's crazy. There's an app for everything. But once we have 5G and these amazing speeds, the applications that will be available, I don't think we have an idea. I think it's going to be amazing for us to come back and, I don't even want to speculate the number of years, but it's going to be, you know, if we were talking in 3 years maybe, I mean, this is going to be antiquated, what we're talking about right now. So I think it's going to be just a whole new level of expectations for consumers and what they do with their mobile broadband devices. 5G will also be able, I want to go back a little bit. So 5G will run on a new high spectrum band that uses higher frequency signals than previous generations. And these higher frequencies are going to support a huge capacity for really fast data services. That's why 5G is so great. It'll also use shorter wavelengths, which means the antenna can be much smaller than existing antennas, like on the macro towers that we see. And again, they can provide very precise directional control. So we're going to be able to pinpoint at this time of day, in this area, we have congestion. Let's control the network with our infrastructure to take care of that congestion at that time of day in that location. That's how pinpointed it will be. 5G will also be able to support over 1,000 more devices per meter than what's supported by 4G. And that's huge because, again, in the Internet of Things world, where everything's going to be connected, watches, refrigerators, I can't even, imagine all the IoT opportunities out there. We're going to have so many more devices that need to be connected to the Internet, so we've got to have the ability to handle all of that traffic. Next slide, please. We expect 5G technology to help us connect more devices faster, enable lower latency, increase battery life, and handle more data. Again, it's all about the data. It really promises to take people to places that they've never been, unlocking brand new experiences like augmented reality. How many of you have heard of augmented reality? Oh yeah, you guys are all smart, so you know what this is all. For those of you who don't know, it's like when you're sightseeing. You have your smartphone, and you can walk around like a historical site, and you'll get all kinds of, as you pass by something, it'll give you a fact about this historical site, or it'll bring up pictures of something in this historical site. So it's putting you in a new reality. It's navigational tools as you're driving your car, and I don't even understand how this is going to work because I can barely use Navigator on my phone, but it'll overlay like a reality picture of what's going on outside your car with your GPS. So all kinds of really cool stuff that is going to be supported by 5G technology. Also more intense and realistic virtual reality. So those of you who are gamers or your kids are gamers, I mean, it's going to be like they're in that world. And I don't know if that's necessarily a great thing, because I know how much time our kids spend doing video games, and to make it more realistic, I don't know, maybe sometimes that's not going to be so great, but it is what it is. But it's also going to enable the technology behind the massive Internet of Things movement, powering the future of driverless cars, telemedicine. We had a great presentation on telehealth today, so it's going to support things like that. Connected power grids, smart homes, and smart cities. Can you change it, please? Here's some applications that 5G will support, and I'm not going to read all of this, but remote surgery. And we heard a little bit about, you know, the telehealth, but Erickson did a trial on using it, luckily a dummy patient, not a real one, because I wouldn't want to volunteer for that, but using a VR headset. So the ability to do surgery from a distance. Haptic feedback, I had to look that up. What does that mean? Bringing a tactile sensation experience, like to a video game, so you can feel things. Weird, right? It just blows your mind, all the opportunities. Self-driving cars, which, you know, we have all heard about, but there's got to be a really robust network to be able to support a self-driving car. You don't want a car to be driving around and then you lose connection. Whoops. Now what? So it's got to be a super robust network to be able to support a driverless car. Drones. Drones are, you know, used a lot right now, but with more capabilities, they're going to be able to be used more and more. We use them to look at macro towers, so people aren't having to climb towers. Like, we can send a drone up and take a look and see what's going on with the equipment and save somebody from having to climb up there. All these applications are very exciting. For the average consumer, we're talking 5G means a full-length HD movie download in seconds, not minutes, which is really important, you know, when you have to get that movie right then. High-speed video games with 0 delay. And 5G is expected to be at least 1 gig per second, or 10 times faster than LTE. So our LTE is pretty fast, so 10 times faster than that, and that's just to start. Next slide, please. It's going to be a massive disruption to business. It's going to change the way business operates as well. 5G will allow over 30 billion devices to be connected globally. 30 billion devices will be connected by 2030. That's a lot of devices. Very reliable. It's going to be a very ultra reliable network. And then again, just more capacity and coverage. Next slide, please. By delivering enhanced capacity and faster connectivity speeds, small cells will also help lay the strong network foundation for various smart cities initiatives. How many of you have heard of smart cities? Yeah, there's some really awesome applications that can be used for cities to be more efficient, save money, and be more consumer friendly. And so just picture a neighborhood where streetlights grow brighter as you walk down the street. So you're walking down at night, you're walking down the street, and the street lights get brighter as you come upon them. And then as you leave that area, they dim. So it saves a massive amount of money in terms of power to cities, so they're not brightly lit all the time. So it can change with the need that's there. A road that alerts crews to dangerous conditions. Like something's going on, crews are alerted and they're there before there's a massive pileup. It's really a great opportunity. Water leaks. So instead of having, there's a detection that there's a water leak in a pipe on a certain street, so they don't have to go, cities don't have to go dig up roads everywhere to try to figure out where the leak is. They know where the leak is. They know exactly where that leak is, and then that saves time and money and a lot of downtime. So there's a lot of opportunities there. Watches that can alert you or your doctor if your vital signs are off. So if you're wearing this cool device and you have, let's say you have some kind of health condition and you wear a device and you're walking around the city and your vital signs, something goes wrong, your doctor's alerted because of things going on in the network in a city. And that's really pretty cool opportunities for all of us. Next slide, please. So again, preparing our network for 5G is an evolution. It's not just flip the switch and it's on. But it's an exciting time to undertake the work of getting to 5G. Technologies like 5G evolution, we actually call that. So there's opportunities for us right now to use small cell technology to boost our existing networks, to make the LTE experience even faster, and create more capacity. So this, even though we're not at 5G, we're moving to that through this evolution, which is going to make all our connectivity even better right now. So in 5G evolution markets, we upgrade cell towers with network upgrades that include ultra-fast LTE advanced features. And then, so we're constantly upgrading, and it's all about the data, right? Trying to make sure that we can pave the way for higher speeds for customers, because they all expect it all the time, and we're not waiting until, we're not just waiting until 5G is ready to go, market ready, we flip the switch and go. We're continually upgrading the networks, not just AT&T, all the carriers are doing that. We're upgrading the networks to prepare for that, but along the way, we're making our LTE experience even better. So in October of 2018, we announced 99 new 5G evolution markets, and this brings our total number of markets with these technologies to 239. So we're trying to roll this out as quickly as we possibly can. And we plan to offer 5G evolution in over 400 markets by the end of the year. So we're really got a pretty aggressive rollout for this, but hopefully we can do that. So with that, I've got some time for questions. Oh, I did pretty good, 5 minutes for questions. Yes. I knew that was going to be asked. We don't have a specific time frame for Wyoming. In Wyoming, I know. It's tough. We, obviously, we've got to go where the market is. We do. It's just, it's reality. But I will say, and this will be a plug, all my carrier friends will, I don't know, they'll pat me on the back or kick me on the way out. What Wyoming can do right now is set the stage for making policies that help streamline, okay? And I'm going to give you a great example, and I was really, really hoping someone would ask me this. We deployed small cells, we had a small cell deployment in Teton County, and we really needed to get those up for the summer traffic. And I called Governor Mead's staff, and I said, I really need some help getting some lease agreements in place quickly. And I did, and they did. They were amazing, because Governor Mead gets this technology, and he understands how important it is for this public-private partnership. We were able to get those deployed and get them up and running, and guess what? That area will be prime for the next. I would just say, encourage municipalities, encourage the state to try to come up with ways to make it easy. I'm not saying we come in and run all over municipalities, but view it as an economic development tool, because this is good for cities to get this. Don't view it as a revenue generator. Let's ding them for $2,000 a small cell. Okay, sorry, we won't come. Okay, I'll just be honest. But help us get there, and then when it is ready to go, it's ready to go, if that makes sense. So thank you for asking that question. I didn't want to say it. I wanted someone to ask me, so thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Is it on? Oh, okay. What's AT&T's vision for, because 5G won't go through buildings because it's such a small wavelength. So are you planning to have just as fast Wi-Fi in tandem with that in the smart cities or in other areas?
Yeah, exactly. We'll have different network components to deal with in building things. So yeah, exactly. Because obviously, most of us spend our time indoors. So yeah. Any other questions? So I was either boring or I just gave such great information that you don't have very many questions. Oh, you got it. One more.
Perspective and what cities could do to help that?
Yeah, interestingly, the FCC just created a new order on small cell and how municipalities should handle the processing of small cell applications. That got us about 90% of the way there. That will be implemented in effect in January 14th. If all municipalities would just revamp their ordinances to reflect that, that would be like getting us 90% there. There's a couple things that we wish would have happened with that. It's important things like letting us, we're talking about, oh, I wish I had the number, 100,000 nodes being deployed in the next few years. Okay, that's a lot of applications. Let us batch them together, okay, and handle them as one application and streamline it. Give us a specific shot clock. If we have it in front of you for 60 to 90 days and everything's there, deem it approved. The market rate, FCC order sets a market rate of, I think, $270 a node. It's the market rate. Don't do like, and I will say it, I have Lincoln, Nebraska. I have Nebraska in my territory. Lincoln's trying to get $2,000 a node. And we're not going to go there. We're just not. And we need to because of the university. We're not going to. That's too much. Don't use it as a revenue generator. The market rate the FCC set is fine. If we could get it lower, yeah, that's great. But, you know, go with the FCC. It's just that, making it easy, knowing what the rules are. Don't treat them like macro towers. They're not macro towers. They're not unsightly things. They're little tiny boxes on light poles. Let us get in the right of way and make it easy for us. It's really pretty simple, honestly. It gets really political and ugly, but it's pretty simple. So, good question.
I've been an AT&T customer for a long time.
Thank you.
Here in Wyoming, mainly because you have a cell site that's LTE that's just a half mile from me, and I live rurally. So it's really very cool. I do travel the state a lot, though, and this is definitely not an AT&T state. Cheyenne, Laramie, Teton County, Lander, Rock Springs, a handful. I get great, and then I roll over to a regional carrier and get poor data service, unfortunately. It's an economic situation for your company, for Verizon, for any of the major carriers. It doesn't sound like it's really 5G, and the small cell situation is mainly geared, I would guess, for high-density populations, urban areas. We have a lot of open space between cities and so forth. Is AT&T planning anything for longer range? You know, I gotta say, I mean, even just finding LTE would be incredible through a good chunk of our state. We leave our towns, and on our drive, we have nothing. Connected cars, as far as entertainment and so forth, is a big situation coming up nationally right now. It's probably not going to happen for decades after other states here in Wyoming because we have so much open space. Is AT&T looking another direction other than small cell technology for states like Wyoming or Nebraska or Montana or Alaska?
That's a great question. And I appreciate you asking that, and I'll appreciate that. I'll shake your hand afterwards. No, we've got a lot of plans for Wyoming. And how many of you heard of FirstNet? Wow. I have our FirstNet folks here too. So FirstNet is a first responder network that AT&T got the contract for from the federal government. It was because it's built because during 9/11, first responders couldn't talk to each other because they're on different networks. So it took a long time from 9/11 to develop this FirstNet network, and AT&T became the contractor. We won the bid for that last year. In Wyoming, yay, was the second state to opt in to FirstNet. Under that obligation, AT&T has provided to the state a build plan over the next 5 years that we are absolutely obligated to perform under. We have to build so many sites, and I can't share those with you because it's proprietary information. It is a solid build plan in Wyoming. And this isn't, the good thing about our FirstNet relationship in Wyoming and across the country is it's not just for first responders. We're allowing our commercial network to be used for first responders, but the more we build onto that through FirstNet, it will be available for our commercial traffic too. You're going to see in the next and I know Tony knows what that build is, but you can grab him on the way out and see if he'll tell you. But it's a great build plan, and it's really it's aimed at rural areas because we have obligation to serve in those rural areas, and it's going to be a whole different network within 5 years because that's our contractual period of time we have to get that done. But we are well ahead of schedule, and it's going to be a great network. So, in terms of, there's a lot of other ideas, air gig, trying to run off power lines to, internet or, services, wireless service. That I don't really understand yet, but that's out there too, which would be great for rural areas. But we're looking at a lot of things because there's a lot of pressure to get coverage in rural areas just for that exact reason. We have driverless cars, great. Well, we better have a lot of connectivity everywhere. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure on all the carriers to serve the rural areas. But I would say for AT&T, the FirstNet is going to be a huge boon for Wyoming's rural areas. Great question, thanks. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. I'm sure we could have a Q&A for hours on end, but I think most of us want to get out of here about 5 o'clock. So we're about 5 minutes over into our break, so tell you what, let's come back at 10 to 3, and we will get back on schedule and try and get us out of here by 5. Thanks.
going to go ahead and get started with the last segment of the 2018 Wyoming Broadband Summit. So if you could please begin taking your seats, we would greatly appreciate it so we can get our next speaker up on stage. Thank you all very much.
So it looks like, Alan, let's take a note for next year. We want 2-hour networking breaks throughout the day. Aaron's there. Yeah? We're going to be stuck here past 5 o'clock trying to get through our program, folks. If you would please take your seats, we'd certainly appreciate it. All right, so next on our agenda is school safety leveraging advanced camera systems. And today we're fortunate to have Mr. Mike Vance with us. Mr. Vance has served as head of product for SAFR Secure Accurate Facial Recognition from Real Networks since March of 2017. Leading product strategy, product management, and UX. Formerly, Mr. Vance led product management for Amazon Instant Video and Fire devices. Prior to that, he led product management and design for T-Mobile USA, where he helped launch digital services and Android devices. Mr. Vance has 12 utility patents and holds degrees in political science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and in design from Art Center College of Design. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Vance to the stage.
Thanks. Let's see if this is working. Is this picking me up? Can you guys hear me? Good? Okay. Now we just need slides. Great. So thank you guys. I know that you guys are just taking your break, so we'll try to get a little energized here. I'm Mike Vance. I run product for a product we call Safer at Real Networks. Let's see if this slide thing works. It works. For those of you who may remember 14.4 modems, Real Networks has been around for a really long time. We pioneered streaming audio and video back in the mid-90s. We've been around since then. A lot of people ask what happened, where'd you guys go? We still do quite a bit in streaming media. Quite a bit it's more on sort of the B2B side. But about 3-4 years ago, we started working on a product to help people organize their home photos and videos, as well as some facial recognition software to not only help with that product line, but also other sort of business spin-offs. We've got global offices all over the world. We're still around. There we go. But recently, about 2 years ago, we put together a product specifically looking at facial recognition. So just a couple of quick definitions. There's a couple of terms that are kind of thrown around, so I just wanted to get those out there. First of all, computer vision is really just the automatic extraction of digital information from photos or videos. So you'll hear that kind of thrown around. That includes not just faces, but objects as well. Face detection is being able to see if an image has a face in it. Recognition is being able to recognize the face in it. And then the broader category we have is called machine learning, and that is training a computer to think like a human. It's a relatively kind of new field. So what distinguishes machine learning from traditional programming? Years ago, like 5 years ago, if you wanted to recognize people's faces, what you do is you define all the different points on the face, and you create algorithms that would measure the distance between those different points on the face. You might have 5, you might have 500, but a person would sit down and tell the computer what to look for. Modern machine learning, though, thanks to advances from Google and some others who put this technology out there, is starting with a computer the same way that you start with a human brain. It's an empty brain that you train. You can jumpstart it with an algorithm, but you're training the computer to think like a human. So for our purposes, what that means is we train it over and over and over again with millions of faces. And it guesses. It says, like, I think these 3 are the same face. And you tell it, did you get those things right or wrong? And if it gets it right, it learns the rules that it created around getting that right. If you get it wrong, it learns the rules on how it got that wrong. But it learns over and over and over again. Just like a kid, when they're born, basically knows one face. They know mom, right? There's mom, and then all of a sudden they double it and they know dad. And there's mom, dad, and everybody else. Over time, they learn about you can learn about 10,000 faces. That's the human brain's capacity to learn faces. Our system can learn millions of faces. It can detect a face down to almost perfect accuracy within 0.2 seconds against a database of millions of faces. So it's much faster than a human. So there's a lot of advantages over a human, but the process is kind of the same. I always use this as sort of an example of, there's the traditional programming, again, where you'd say, okay, I'm not this person, but I am this other person. And you do it by these kind of measurements. But like, these are all, I'm Michael, I'm Mike, but I'm also Michael. These are 3 people named Michael. If I asked you, am I the same person as the person on the left, you'd say, no, that's a woman. That's Michael Learned. She was an actress on the Waltons back in the day, I think it was. And if I asked you, like, how would you know that? You'd say, oh, because she's a woman, right? You're a man, she's a woman. I know you're not the same person. Okay, great. Well, how about the middle one? That's Mikhail Gorbachev, another Michael. You'd be able to say, okay, he's a lot older, bald. He's got a distinct pattern on his head. Like, you'd be able to kind of tell me what criteria you use to distinguish me from those other 2 people. Now that you've got Michael J. Fox, I'm not Michael J. Fox. You've been exposed to pictures and video of that guy over the years. But if you tried to distinctly tell me why I'm not this guy, you'd have a harder time articulating that. And that's really what machine learning kind of gets at as well. We know the output and we know the input for machine learning. We know when we say, is this the same as this other person, they'll be able to tell you, the computer will be able to tell you, yes, that's the same person, no, it's not. But you wouldn't be able to go into that and understand the different criteria in the same way that you wouldn't be able to go into a human brain and understand all the different criteria that was used to tell me that I'm not any of these 3 people, or at least one of the 3 people. So the Safer platform, what we've built, it's facial recognition, things that sort of distinguish it, high degree of accuracy, I'll kind of get into that a little bit, performance. We split up the processing quite a bit. So, as far as broadband goes, we do quite a bit of the processing locally, and then only a little bit goes into the cloud. So we kind of distribute the processing a little bit. And then it's able to be installed on all kinds of different platforms. So it's on our cloud, other clouds, people's cloud. Eventually, we're also working with camera manufacturers. You could put this technology on a camera, and you never even really have to hit a cloud at all. That way. We've been ranked by NIST, the FBI Mike guy, I think it was here earlier, talked about NIST a little bit. It's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's a US-run program that evaluates, if you want to know what time it is, they manage the atomic clock. They also evaluate facial recognition technologies. So we've been ranked 6th in the world according to NIST, top US company. So we're incredibly accurate. And we really laser focus in on something called wild faces. So quite a few facial recognition systems are trained with Visa photos, mugshots, things like that, where the people are looking directly into the camera. With our system, we train on all kinds of different things, hats, sunglasses, smiling, laughing, crying, things like that. And so what that does is it allows you to pick up people in moving video where the person might not be sort of what they call camera aware, just walking down a corridor, walking into an event, things like that. It's really important when you start talking about accuracy because quite a few systems can tell people when they're looking directly into a camera, like if you're trying to get into a door. But if you turn to the side, it would lose you. It wouldn't know who you are. There's a lot of different terms that we use to evaluate that scale, size in the camera, pose, whether they're looking down, up, things like that. Occlusion, if they're wearing sunglasses or hats or partially covered. Expression, if they got makeup, here you see face paint, things like that, we can see through that. And then illumination, dark, light, etc. Specifically for faces in the wild, there's a UMass set of data that's labeled that's publicly out there, and so you can measure yourself against it. In a fraction of a second, a computer can tell you the difference between these people, like who's right and who's wrong. If you guys stare at this long enough, you might be able to take a pretty good guess at it. But basically, the computer is fed different images and says, are these the same person or are they not the same person? The other thing that's really important with systems is reducing bias. There's a lot of articles that are written right now on skin tone and its effect on facial recognition platforms. So there's a number of reasons that bias shows up in a system. One is just programmer bias. Again, with the more modern technologies like what we're working off of, you're really just training the model. Second is available data. Third, we use strictly geometry to tell the difference between faces, so we ignore skin tone. That's why we can tell people with face paint and other things like that apart. That said, there is still a difference in the accuracy of all facial recognition systems. There's a small difference in shades of skin, and there's a small difference between men and women for some reason. And that's true of all facial recognition systems. So it's just something to consider with facial recognition. There's always going to be a little bit of bias in the system. Again, we can be leveraged on-premise, in the cloud, in other people's cloud, with a small data footprint that goes in and out. So here's how our system works. You can hook it up to any IP-based video camera. So I'll show you a little bit. One of the products that we've launched is for schools. So a school, a sports stadium, a venue like this can put our technology down on-premise and tell it which cameras to watch, feed it a set of faces to look out for, VIPs, dangerous people, et cetera. And it just monitors those cameras and processes it all locally. So it looks, again, we talked about earlier, facial detection. It detects whether or not there's a face in that video stream. Once it finds if there's a face in the video stream, it then converts that into over 1,000 different vectors on the face. It does that either in the cloud or it can do that in our cloud. And so this handoff really is, instead of piping 4K video from a place like this or a high school with hundreds of cameras, you can imagine how much bandwidth that would take up. What we do is we break the process down. So the first 2 steps, like I said, are all on-premise. They'd happen, if it was here, they'd be looking at the cameras. Once it detects a face, it pulls that face out of live video and compresses that down to about a 14K image. That image is then sent off either in the cloud or to a second local set of processing that converts that into a facial signature, mathematical vectors in Euclidean space for those geometry nuts out there, and then compares it against a database. All of that happens along with then the return back to the local saying, hey, I recognize that person or I didn't recognize that person. All that happens in less than 0.2 seconds. So that's with 4G connections, Wi-Fi, et cetera. So from the time that it spots a face on a video camera, sends it to the cloud, turns it into a facial signature, and returns it, all that's 0.2 seconds or less. And then what we do is we apply rules. So if we detect that a good person shows up in front of an electronically locked door, we can unlock that door. If we find that a bad person shows up on any camera that's not supposed to be there, we can instantly send out alerts. We can plug in with E911 systems. We can lock school doors down, things like that. And all that can happen again in 0.2 seconds. It also, this whole process, is incredibly fast, robust, impervious to error, things like that. There's a pretty funny video out there. Has anybody seen the video of there are people dressed in white, people dressed in black, handing basketballs back and forth? Okay. Go see it. It's pretty funny. It's an experiment that they ran. I can't remember exactly where they ran it, but they videotaped people dressed all in black and all in white, and they just handed basketballs back and forth. And they asked people watching the video to count the white team passing the basketball. So they counted and everything, and everybody got it pretty much right. And then they went back and said, hey, how many of you guys saw the guy in the black gorilla suit walking through the camera going like this? And nobody saw the guy, right? And so because they were so attuned to the task of looking for the basketball being passed off that they completely missed the gorilla walking through the camera, right? So that's kind of how the human brain works. There's, even if you paid somebody to sit there and watch hundreds of video monitors at any given point in time, a person's always going to have their, their focus go off, or even when they are focused, they're not going to be able to see certain things, whereas this is always on and always working. So I'm going to transition a little bit and talk specifically about a product that we're doing for schools. So right now with Tony's group, we're going through a couple different evaluation periods on Safer for Schools. We launched in in July, we launched a program specifically for US and Canada-based schools to do facial recognition software. It's free for individual schools, and we're offering 50% discount for school districts and kind of network schools. So same thing like I just described. It's something that you put down in the school. You tell it which cameras to watch. It can do a few cameras or it can do hundreds of cameras. And then you tell it what to look out for. So we've taken the SAFER platform and applied it to schools for this year. This, I think, is a video that should play. So let's see if it plays. Can you hit the play button and see if it works? Should have been embedded. Okay. If not, I'll finish 2 minutes earlier. Okay, we'll just skip through. I've got screenshots of it too.
You have to download Real Player file.
To upgrade. $17.99 upgrade, that's right. Anyway, I've got screenshots of the video a little bit later. I can show you a little bit more about it, or you can go to our website if you want to see it. So a couple things about the platform itself. It's engineered specifically for privacy, so all of the data remains with the school. We don't collect the data, we don't scrape the data, we don't use the faces to train our model or anything else like that. It's completely owned by the school, the same way that the school owns attendance records, grades, even with school nurses, medical records, allergies, all kinds of things like that. So it's built so that each school or school district has their own set of data. One school, if you graduated from one school and went to another, if they were in a different database, you'd have to start all over. Parents, same kind of thing like that. So it's totally private. It's not really sort of a public cloud. It's a private cloud for the schools. You can also import photos from school ID systems. So, if a school wanted to, with permission of the parents or the kids, they could import school ID photos, or you can take a picture of the kid or the parent, or teachers or things like that at a kiosk in the school. I think I ran out of range on this thing. There we go. Like I said, it works with all existing IP cameras. It supports existing entry and exit systems. I'll show you in a little bit, but it can automatically unlock doors when the right people show up in front of the doors. Delivers instantly alerts for unauthorized access. So if people show up that shouldn't be there, it'll instantly alert the school and let people know that that the wrong people are there. It can integrate with school entry, record keeping, campus monitoring, guest check-in system, et cetera. And we just launched our Windows product last week, so now it's available on Windows as well. Do you mind forwarding? Yeah. It's all in real time. We can detect and match millions of faces in real time, like I said. It's architected to scale with high performance, fast processing, even for low bandwidth kind of rural areas. So that's super important when we design for schools. The whole thing can work off a 120 kilobit connection. It doesn't need broadband to operate. So you can use it. We've also been talking to several retail customers and things like that. And so in a retail environment, you got a large shopping mall. They kind of chop off the bandwidth by store. Then within the store, you've got POS systems and other things that are competing for bandwidth. And so ours kind of works on a small sliver of the bandwidth. So what is it? So first and foremost, you have to get people into the system. It's all opt-in. So if parents are in the system, if teachers are in the system, in several schools we're working with, school kids are in the system. They come up to a kiosk, they put their face in, and they register with the system. From there, that goes to a school administrator. The school administrator okays them, says if they're a parent, a teacher, et cetera, categorizes the people. And then they're basically in the system. So totally opt-in. Next. Thank you. A lot of schools are using it for entry control. So in today's, especially in urban environments, they're really concerned with who's coming onto a campus. So a lot of schools have put up gates, door buzzers, et cetera. But what that does is create a lot of overhead for the school because they're always having to answer the door. And a lot of the schools that we talk to, particularly in the urban environments, there's so many people coming to the door, they just buzz everybody through. So, they've erected these great door buzzer systems to keep people out, but then they just let everybody in because there's just so much overhead with the people behind the desk, answering the doorbell on a regular basis. So what our software does is the school can say, I want this class of people to get in at this particular period of time. So I'll give you an example. One of the schools that we work with in the Seattle area, it's a private school, has drop-off and pick-up times. So there's certain times when parents can drop off the kids in the morning and pick them up in the afternoon. But at all other hours of the day, the doors are locked and the gate is closed. If a parent comes to pick up their kid early because they have a doctor's appointment or they drop off the kid late, they have to buzz to get in. So what we did was, first and foremost, we registered all of the staff at the school. So they don't need their ID badges to come in. They can just walk up, use their face, and get into the front gate. They were really concerned with giving badges out to anybody outside of staff because, if you give out badges to parents and nannies and aunts and uncles and things like that, all of a sudden everybody's got a badge and they lose them and they kind of go missing and things like that. So it becomes a lot of overhead. So with this system, they started registering parents. And initially we launched this sort of mid-school year last year, and we got about half the parents to register for it. There were some questions about where the data go and things like that, but in general people were kind of comfortable with it. This school year, pretty much every parent registered for it. I mean, there's a lot more. First of all, everybody who used it last year kind of evangelized how quick and easy it was. But then second of all, it just felt like more of the process really for the school. So, so if you're a parent now, you can just walk up to the gate opens. That's cut their gate traffic by over 80%. And so what that means then is that the school can focus on the people that either don't belong there or that aren't there on a regular basis. So, UPS guy's in there. He can just come in and make deliveries, walk through the gate. But if he's out sick or something like that and somebody's the backup, then the next person up has to ring the doorbell and get in, right? So that'd be kind of that 20% of the people that aren't sort of managed through that way. We hear that from other schools as well, that it seems to really cut down on the overhead with the school. Because the school doesn't want to hire extra people just to answer the doorbell all the time, and that's kind of what winds up happening. Yeah, and so what does this look like then? So from the inside of the school, there's a console that they get. It's a management console that alerts them to things that are going on. So in this case, person comes up to the front gate. She's recognized. It pops up a notice inside the school to let them know that they've opened up the gate. It pops up her name. So when she walks up to the front desk, they can greet her by name. They know who that is. A lot of schools have, at my kid's school, there's a woman named Corliss. She knows everybody. If you meet her once, she knows your name. She knows your kids. She knows who you're authorized to pick up. But she occasionally leaves the desk to go on vacation. She's out sick, things like that. And like the whole system breaks down. And so then there's this huge queue of people there, while people are looking up, like, who are you? Who's your kid? Are you authorized to take, this kid, that kid, et cetera? This system will just automatically let whoever's sitting at the desk know who's at the front door, who they're authorized to pick up, et cetera. Second, then, it lets them know that the gate opened, which is important. You kind of have to know that people are coming and going. And then third, on the right-hand side, you can see it captures all the events that happen throughout the day. So interestingly, at this school, they charge if you're late more than 5 times. So they're using this as a sort of a record keeper. So, because a lot of times the parents say, oh no, I was there at like 3:57 and you shut, you shut the door or something like that. Well, they can go back and say, no, you're there like 4:20, sorry. So, but you can also then see everybody who's come in through the door. Now this is true, in addition to doors, the same kind of running record of everything that happened. So, if you wanted to say, hey, have any students gone out, the east door today, because they shouldn't be, they're sneaking out, you could go back and just, narrow down to that and just see if any students have gone out that. So pretty much a running record of people that are known at the school. I'm going to go to the next slide. This is an example of somebody who's not recognized. So this person walks up, they're not in the system. It alerts them that they need to ring the doorbell. In this case, the school has a small speaker outside, so it can push an audio clip out to the speaker, and it says, welcome to UCDS, please buzz to get in. So there's sort of different cases for this. And then if you go one more. That's me. I'm incredibly threatening. So, so in this case, I've been registered. There's two different levels in the system of threats. There's a base level, which is nothing, right? There's a level of concern. So a level of concern might be parents get divorced, dad doesn't have custody anymore, shouldn't be on campus. It's not a threat to safety, but you definitely, as a school administrator, want to know when that person shows up because they're just not allowed there, and they're definitely not allowed to take the kid. The third one then is what this is showing, and that's threat. So this is somebody who presents a present danger to the school by them being on campus. So it could be, you know, a student who's been expelled, who's made a threat against the school. It could be an abusive ex-spouse who's specifically banned from having anything to do with the kids. One of the schools that we're working with in the Seattle area has a lot of adopted kids, and the birth parents don't have the right to get in contact with the kids. So they're using this system to alert them if anybody shows up on campus who's specifically banned from having any contact with the kids. So any camera that they show up on, it automatically alerts the school. This school also, it's kind of funny, they have a woman at the front desk, but she's kind of around the school at various times every day. It's a smaller school. So we help them integrate with these LED bulbs around the school. So if I show up, if a threat shows up, the lights turn red. So they know instantly that there's something that they need to look after when a couple of lights around the school turn red. I'm going to go to the next slide. And then they get a pop-up. It says threat detected pretty loudly. There's a lot of different alerts that sort of happen. So hopefully this doesn't happen very frequently, but if it does, they'll notice it. So in addition to front doors and things like that, you can also have it monitor internal hallways. So in this school, the entries on the top floor, they have clear visibility to all the different classrooms and things like on the second floor, but on the first floor, it's built into a hill. There's doors down there that sometimes get propped open. There's a janitor's door out to the back that has a glass window on it and things like that. And so they're kind of concerned about who might be coming in and who might be on that downstairs. So what our system does downstairs for this school, we have age detection and gender detection and sentiment detection built into it. So they're using age detection to ignore anybody under the age of 18. So if any kid shows up on any of these cameras, it doesn't do anything at all. It doesn't identify them. It just says, oh, it's a kid, ignore them, right? For adults then, it compares them against the people who are in the system. And that's parents, volunteers, teachers, you know, even day guests like, you know, the fireman who's there to teach CPR, things like that. And so if anybody shows up on these cameras that isn't one of those people that are in the system, it alerts the people upstairs that they should take a look at the video camera. Now, it might be that somebody just didn't register because they declined to register, they didn't want to use it. That's fine, it's just they look at it and say, oh, that's so-and-so. But at least this way they can kind of know if there are people downstairs that haven't checked into the school. Secondly then, if there's anybody that's a threat that's been labeled a threat, it automatically sets off the exact same alarms that the rest of the school sets off. This school, in addition, is using, you can see this, we can deploy this on iPads, we can on Android tablets, phones, things like that. They're using this to get into one of the downstairs doors. So in the downstairs doors, it's only teachers and staff who can get in there. And it's an unattended door. So the first two doors, there's two different buildings, have staff who are at a desk right behind the door so they can greet people and things like that. For the unattended door downstairs, we wanted to make sure that there was a second layer of security that you couldn't use, I don't know, silicone mask or, you know, pictures or things like that to try to cheat the system to get in. Because there are ways, I mean, facial recognition just recognizes faces, and if you present a reasonable facsimile of a face, it'll let you in. With this one, not only do you have to be recognized, but then you have to perform an action to prove that you're a live face versus, you know, a picture, a silicone mask, or something else. It asks you to smile. So when you walk up to the door, you know, it recognizes you. If you're in the system, it says, please smile to unlock. And then you smile, and the door unlocks. Again, that's 0.2 to 0.3 seconds round trip, so it's not a very long period of time, but it's just long enough that, you know, you just make sure that the person that's presenting them is the right person. You can also set different time of days on that. So you can say, hey, between core hours, this is the way our office works, between 9 to 5, you don't have to smile to unlock because there's a person at the front desk, from 7 a.m. till 9 a.m. and from 5 p.m. till 8 p.m. You have to smile, and then after that, you have to use a badge. So, there's all kinds of different rules that you can put on, and you can do that by door. So certain doors, like any of the doors into our secure facilities are always, where we're doing more of our experiments and things like that, our core tech, you have to smile to unlock all the time. Whereas going to the cafeteria, you can just walk right in. Next one. So with schools, the big thing that we talk to all schools about is facial recognition technology is new. I think there's a lot of parents and students and things like that who really haven't caught up to even just being on camera, period. If you ask a typical high school student how many cameras are in their school, they might say 10 to 20. I mean, more typically it's about 100 to 150 cameras in a big high school. So I think that there's, when you start talking about implementing a facial recognition system, there's an awareness that it creates that you're on camera pretty much 24/7 whenever you walk into any of these buildings. Since we've been working on this project, if you walk downtown Seattle, pretty much anywhere you're going to start to notice security cameras all over the place. And it's a consciousness that I don't think that we've really had. Because of that, and because a lot of the press out there, just about, like I talked about earlier, bias in the system, things like that. It's super important for the school, office building, whoever's thinking about putting this in, to really engage first before they make that critical leap to do this. And so we encourage everybody to engage with student leaders, with faculty, to kind of talk about how it might be used and to get any concerns. This school that I showed you where they were using it downstairs, they engaged with the community. It's over 90, that school in particular is over 90% people of color. And so there was a lot of concern with the community about how it would be used and how accurate it was. So we partnered with them to do a couple of really small targeted pilots. The staff has similar demographics, and so the staff was using it to get in and out without any problems. And then we started to slowly kind of roll it out, but it wasn't like we put the whole system in all at once. It was a very small, kind of slow, targeted rollout. And so that's kind of what we see in the schools that we engage with is, initial discussion, talk about how it might be used, and then slowly roll it out in a series of pilots. In addition to schools, there's a lot of other things that this technology can be used for. And so these are a number of the different industries that we're talking with right now. So for example, I've talked a little bit about secure access and being able to get in and out of buildings. But in addition to schools, you can use this for co-working spaces. You can use this for, we can use this in multi-factor authentication. You can hold up badge patterns to get in with your face and the badge. So if you're trying to get into banks or other things like that, there might be second factor to get in. Next slide. There's a lot of interest in this also in loyalty and VIP. So the first thing you think about when you think about facial recognition are the bad use cases. But there's also a lot of interest in identifying the people that you want to recognize in some way. So sports stadiums want to recognize the people who buy the loyalty boxes. If you are in a retail environment, you want to be able to recognize the people that walk in who are loyalty members. Airlines are really interested in this in airplane lounges and in checking people on and off of airlines quickly. So, bestowing premium benefits onto people, priority handling, concierge services, all those things are really interesting because there's, earlier they were talking a lot about the digital data, but there's really no facial data. There's no physical data when you walk into a store. So if you want to get your VIP treatment, you really have to kind of check in. So again, it should be opt-in, but for the right people, it might be interesting. Next. Venue monitoring is huge. So if you walk into, we're in Seattle, we're right across from the Mariner Stadium. If you walk in the Mariner Stadium and you use a ticket to get in, they really don't know who you are. They know who purchased the ticket, but they don't know who you are. If you get drunk and you start a fight and you get kicked out, you can go buy a ticket from a scalper and walk in another entrance and go right back in the game. If you come back the next day, they don't know who you are. If you're on the MLB banned list, unless the person sitting there studying those 50 to 60 people, they can't really prevent you from coming in because they don't know who you are. If you went to 50 baseball games in a year, they couldn't possibly reward you because you maybe have bought those 50 tickets from 50 different people, and you look like 50 different people when you walked in the door. Or, you know, the scalpers who buy hundreds of tickets look like they're going to every single game, but they're really not. So you can create some great venue monitoring for band people in addition to VIPs by establishing a pretty good perimeter using existing IP cameras around stadiums and other public venues using a system like ours. The big problem with a lot of these facilities is because they're so hyper secure on the inside, they're creating a lot of soft targets on the outside. So because it takes so long to get through security, it creates crowds outside. And so when you see what's happened recently in Europe, there was an Ariana Grande concert in Northern England that was hit. There was a a football match, soccer match in Europe, I think it was in France, that was hit. And it was usually in the outside, because that's where people are congregating. So if you can speed people through the queues using facial recognition or some other technology to get them through faster, you create less opportunity for those targets outside of the venues. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, with that as well. And then insights. So I mentioned it before, but we don't actually have to know who we are. We have similar degrees of accuracy with being able to tell male, female, age ranges, smiling, frowning. We have a general sentiment score. So, you know, if you're happy, we know you're happy. If you're not happy, we know you're not happy. And so the way that this is used is not down to the individual level, but, you know, a smart kiosk or something like that at a grocery store. You'd be able to tell what the general traffic and demographic makeup was of the people who walk by without going down into like who is that particular individual. So you can look at large crowds. Stadiums are interested in things outside of stadiums because they have ad inventory that they show on a lot of their digital displays, but they're pretty dumb. They don't know who's there. They could tell, are there mainly men or women that are looking at it? Are people generally happy, like they just won the game, or not so happy they didn't win the game when they're leaving the stadium? And they'd know, hey, if they're happy, they might want to go out and have drinks afterwards. And if they do, you might want to surface inventory for restaurants in the area. Whereas if you're, you know, not so happy, maybe you just show a Coke ad and let them go home. Right. How am I doing on time? So real quick, there's a lot of different configurations. I think this gets a little bit back into schools, but it's for other venues as well. So core configuration, you know, just a local safer server, you know, monitoring video feeds, detecting faces. All that is doing the bulk of the processing. So the really data intensive, you know, more from the bandwidth perspective, intensive tasks are happening on the edge. Then it's breaking it down and sending it out for final recognition. There's a simple admin station and then a registration kiosk. Next. And you can extend it to, you know, hundreds of cameras if you want to. So, you know, some of the schools that we've been talking to really want to monitor all, you know, 150 or so. One of the schools is, I guess, anyway, when kids get into fights, they're smart enough that they don't fight in school. There's a little bit of pushing, and then they go out to the parking lot. And so they want to know when students are out in the parking lot because that's really a fight. So there's a couple different ways that schools are interested in this, but you can really extend this out to all of your cameras if you wanted to. I think I won't go into these devices because I think we've got, is it 15 minutes left, or is that right? Should we do questions? Yeah? Are there any questions? Yeah?
Do you have to use to register, can you use your own webcam at home, or do you have to use
It's a good question. Any picture that's over about 160 pixels by 160 pixels works. So for school, because we want people to really opt into the system, we're really advising people to come in and use that registration kiosk. For other venues, though, like we're working with a large health club facility, they were testing importing photos out of their membership databases and then having people opt in and seeing if they could recognize them right away. But yeah, you can take a selfie of yourself. There's mobile apps. You can get it anyway. Yeah?
So does it integrate with PowerSchool?
What's Power? Sorry.
PowerSchool is like for parents going to register their kids and check on their grades and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it can. So it can integrate with pretty much any system. There's a couple different interesting use cases for that. Number one, some schools are looking at using it for attendance. So a kid walks in, they just look at an iPad that's right there, and they check themselves into the classroom. Now, we wouldn't advocate I don't know if anybody's heard, in China, there's this whole social scoring mechanism that they're using, and one of the things they're using facial recognition for in classrooms is to see if you're paying attention. And there's a grade they're giving you on how frequently you're paying attention. So, so we don't recommend that at all. But yeah, you could use it for checking in. There's a lot of logistics over buses. I've got an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they're smart enough to get on the purple bus or the red bus sometimes. But you can check them onto the bus using an iPad, and when they get off, the driver would be able to tell what stop they got off at, and then they could check them off at that stop, and it would say, oh, that's not their normal stop, or that's their wrong stop. But yeah, it can integrate with a lot of different systems. So yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
So does it stop with faces?
Good question. No. So the way that our system works, some systems do faces and objects. And if you want to do both, they're different systems. The way our system works is it does objects, period. And a face is an object. A body is an object. Other things are objects. So with faces, it says, oh, I detected that there was an object that we call face. And then we're going to go deeper into that and understand, is it the right face? Is it Mike? But it can also do other objects. So we're working on other training models for that as well. So the obvious question we get asked is guns. Right? Can it do guns? And it can. I think what we're really, really concerned about with guns is if you tell, I'll use Corliss, but the woman at my kid's school, she's, I'm guessing, somewhere in her 60s. If you say, hey, somebody's on campus that shouldn't be on campus, she'd probably be able to handle that information rationally. If all of a sudden you said gun, a lot of stuff happens when you say gun. There are procedures that instantly go into effect. And so we're just trying to be really cautious, not just on our ability to detect gun versus play gun versus plunger, other things that look like guns, as well as the policies that you'd have to have in place to make sure that it didn't, you hear stories about kids playing with toy guns in parks, and police show up and there's an incident. So you just don't want that to happen. So we're just being really cautious about how we approach that. But in theory, yeah. Yeah, anything else? Yeah?
You said there's about 14K worth of data per face.
Yep.
If an event has several thousand people, the camera grabbing 100 faces at a time?
It is, yeah. So we've even worked on 16K cameras. So at a large stadium, you can take a camera at one end of the stadium and point it at another end of the stadium and get enough facial data on everybody in the seat to be able to identify people in the seat. Now, how useful is that information? Who knows? But you could take a flash of that and then, let's say during the singing of the national anthem or something like that, when people are probably most likely to be there, and then get an instant snapshot of who's in their seats and things like that. But it's really just horsepower. There's processing power to be able to process that many faces concurrently. The system just queues up. So in that example I gave, you might have 35,000 people at the Mariners Stadium. Some of the larger stadiums, like over 100,000 people at University of Michigan. That might not happen in 0.2 seconds because you're queuing up your events, but it would catch up pretty quickly to it. Yeah.
So there's an edge device that looks like you're using CAT. Can you use those in situations like that?
That's right, yeah. So basically what happens is the video feed comes into a computer that's looking at that feed. In the case of an iPad, it's happening on the iPad, so you don't even need a computer in that case. So all the processing's happening right there. Once it detects the face and extracts it, a couple things happen. Number one, there's some quick analysis to know if it's a decent enough photo. Is it blurry, or things like that. If it's good enough, then it passes it off. The second thing then is it locks onto that face. And so it's not doing 30 faces per second. It's following that faces around, and it's just sampling it when it needs to. So there's quite a bit of kind of management and intelligence on how it maps out those faces on the camera. But yeah, that initial one is about 14K. Yeah. Any other questions? Anybody excited about this or scared about this? Excited? Okay, I saw some excitement. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, you know, I work in this field. It's, I think there's a lot of really great potential with it. There's a lot of security potential with this. You know, so it's just, you know, hopefully by us being out there and sharing what we do and how we do it and things like that provokes a lot of thought around it. It's really up to policymakers to decide what to do with this. I'd say just kind of in closing, Europe is quite a bit more advanced than we are in this, in that they've launched something called GDPR. And GDPR is a Europe-wide body of standards on managing personal data. Everybody has to opt in. They have to be able to see the data that you collect about them. They have to be able to opt out if they ever want to. You have to destroy that data in a timely manner when they opt out. Here, it's really up to the states. And so several states have gone to some extreme measures. Like in Florida, you can't create a biometric signature for a student. You just can't. Whereas some states don't have any laws at all, right? So in some states, they regard it as PII, and other states, they don't. So you know, I think it's really up to the state to determine what they do with this and how they treat it, as well as hopefully at some point we'll have some federal guidance. Because I can tell you just as a provider in this space, it's difficult because you have to have different rules by every state, right? And so there's just different features that we can enable that we can't enable in Florida. So we just have to be super mindful of that. But yeah.
Kind of addressing that issue, do you know, is there any interest or push at the federal level to have any sort of legislation like governing the deployment of this kind of technology?
Yeah, so Microsoft had a VP on AI call for federal regulation. He didn't get a lot of takers, but I do think that this is going to come up. It has to. You know, I think there's a lot of benefit, again, to having a standard set of rules that everybody plays with. I think the other, you know, the other danger really with this is that in states that don't have some sort of policy around it, there's a lot that you can do with this technology. If you know, we're pretty careful screening who we work with, but there's a lot that you could do with this technology that maybe isn't, you know, so positive. Again, in China, for those of you who don't know, in addition to the you know, spying on students or just, you know, grading students, there are these social scores that they're giving. So if you walk against the red hand, they'll ding you on a social aggregate. It's sort of like your Uber rider score, right? So you have a social score, and so if you apply for a loan at a bank or if you apply for a job, they'll look up your social score and it goes, oh, it looks like you know, walked against the crosswalk too many times. Not only that, but they put your picture on the crosswalk. So if you walk against the cross, they publicly shame you, just like back in the day they'd put checks up behind, you know, bounce checks. So all your neighbors know that you walked against the crosswalk, right? So there's a lot that you can do with this technology that just, you know, isn't incredibly positive. So yeah, so I think it's good to have different layers of consideration about this. But again, I think it'd be more helpful at the federal level. Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned the 14K and that's a facial picture. Do you apply this also to, say, automobiles on the highway? And what size picture would that be?
Yeah, that's been solved for us. There's a lot that do that. Now, in our system, the way we work is if we recognize an object as a license plate, we can pass that off to a second-party service to say, oh, that's a Wyoming plate, and it's these numbers, and oh, it's expired, right? So you can use our system, you know, to not only do faces, but to also break out other systems within it, optical character recognition and things like that. But yes, you could do that.
Can you see faces within cars?
Yes. There's another company that we're talking to right now that claims they can do it through tinted windows. So I don't know how they do it, but we'll get an NDA and we'll figure it out. But yeah, there's a lot of technology out there right now on being able to identify people within vehicles. We're using it at our place to be able to just pay for parking and to get in and out of parking because a lot of times you forget your badge and, you know, you're stuck in the parking garage. Yeah.
You brought up a number of applications for schools and whatnot.
Yep. We are, yeah. And so a lot of them are in the use cases that I threw out there. You know, secure access is a big one. In general, you know, retail and public spaces is an uncomfortable space for a lot of people. Like if you think about it, if you walk into let's say Macy's, right? You walk into a Macy's, you may have spent $5,000 there yesterday. You may, be a potential customer because you looked online, or it's raining in Seattle and you just need to get out of the rain for 5 minutes, right? And so there's a lot of discomfort with people leveraging facial recognition in giant open spaces, public spaces like that. Schools, workplaces, stadiums, TSA lines, pretty much government buildings, et cetera. Anywhere where you really have to show an ID to identify yourself, to show that you belong, health clubs, gyms, et cetera. Like all those places are great places for facial recognition because there's already systems to identify those people to begin with. This just makes it a lot quicker, more accurate, right? And so, we can compare faces on a government ID to somebody walking down a corridor and know if that's the same person or not. Yeah?
GDPR and your technology, are you
Yeah.
able to get around privacy by abstracting the face into geometries and then the image?
It's still considered to be a biometric signature, right? And so the way that GDPR works, and I go into depth on this because this may come here as well. You can create a temporary biometric signature of an individual to look them up. So let's say you walk into an airport, right? We can, or anybody can take your face, your picture, turn it into a signature and do a query. Once we determine that you're not in our data set, you haven't opted in, or for security purposes you haven't been put into that data set, then that facial signature just goes away. So that's sort of how GDPR works. I would highly, if there are people out there at the state government level thinking about policy, Illinois is going through a lot of legal turmoil right now because even that process is deemed to be outside of the Illinois laws. And it means basically that you can't even really use facial recognition for security purposes and things like that. So they're looking at amending their laws right now and creating some kind of fair use guidelines, like maybe it's for like 1 to 4 hours or something like that that allows you to create facial signatures. Because if a bad guy walks into a store, you want to know if that, you want to be able to instantly know if that person doesn't belong there. And according to a few of the state's laws, it's either gray area, or in the case of Illinois, it's outside the bounds of that. So there's several companies right now that are working with the state legislators to see what they can do. Is that good? Yeah, we're out of time. Thank you. Thanks.
Man, technology's cool. Mike, we appreciate that. I'm sure you'll hear from a number of our folks in due time. All right, to close out the day, last but not least, we've got one of our own. Topic to finish out is how to bring broadband options to your community. And Mr. Brian Worthen will be joining us here shortly. Brian purchased ownership in Visionary Communications back in 2001. And in 2005, Brian and his management team formed what's known as Mammoth Networks, which quickly evolved into an aggregator of disparate technologies and services onto a single managed platform. Now known as Visionary Broadband, Brian's company offers services in 94 cities, towns, unincorporated places, and populated places across Wyoming, covering 66% of Wyoming's population with broadband, internet, and private line services. The company is currently rolling out 5G technology to deliver gigabit speeds in engaging communities in Colorado, developing public-private partnerships throughout the Western Slope, including the Northwest Colorado Broadband Partnership in Root County and the Pitkin County Broadband Initiative in Pitkin County. So please join me in welcoming Brian to the stage.
Well, I'm not as eloquent as Governor Meade or as entertaining as Russ Elliott, but as an entrepreneur, I can say that if you each put $5 in a hat, I will end this early. So who's got the hat? I want to talk today about how to bring broadband to your community. If each of you took your hard-earned money and put it into a food truck, let's say $50,000, and you invested it, where would you park it? Would you park it in Banner, Beulah, Bill, Bosler, Bondurant, Buford? Those are just the towns under 100 people in this state that start with the letter B. And why does that seem seem crazy to do with a $50,000 food truck. You've bought the vehicle, you've stocked it up. Why does that seem crazy? You need a certain amount of population, don't you? I would contend you would park your food truck in the C cities, Casper, Cheyenne, Gillette, or Cody, or the G cities, Gillette, Green River, okay? If I've spent $50,000 on a food truck, I would want foot traffic. Broadband is the same way. A food truck is successful when there's high foot traffic. You're going to want to put it in a downtown area, at an event, something along those lines. The road to profit is difficult with broadband when someone's 2 miles down the road. There's not enough foot traffic. When homes are 10 acres apart, it's hard to justify the expense. So let's talk about broadband funding sources. There's a number of government-based funding, such as USDA grants, USDA-backed loans. You can get, as an entrepreneur, you can get an SBA-backed loan. There's EDA grants that fund fiber trunk lines through communities. There's obviously the $10 million Wyoming fund. There's a new telehealth fund, $100 million. The USDA also is rolling out a $600 million e-connectivity pilot. So when we think about all these options, the FCC has an ACAM program for $2.2 billion a year that helps subsidize broadband and connectivity in rural areas. The $10 million fund in Wyoming is not the only source. But we have to work together because there's been successes and failures in the past. In the past, the USDA has had the Community Connect Fund. The Connect America Fund just closed. That was a $2 billion fund. It was a reverse auction. They basically tried to cover as much area as possible that was not covered previously by CAF, and ultimately awarded $148 million a year for 10 years. The NTIA ran a broadband stimulus program called BTOP or BIP, and these are successful programs in the past and programs that are happening today. But in the future, what's interesting is they're already planning, sorry, there goes that eloquence thing again. They're already planning a CAF 3 or a phase 2 of the CAF 2 fund. So they know that there's certain areas, and I say they, we all know there's certain areas that aren't being funded. But the problem with these programs is they leave out certain things. There's areas where CAF money, for instance, wasn't handed out because a previous recipient had received money for that area. There's areas which no longer meet the definition of unserved. They're now meeting the definition of underserved. And that's the result of bad data from providers. That's a result of bad data from the fact that it has to be accumulated and put together and put into a report, which takes a couple years. So there were areas of the CAF reverse auction this year where we looked at it, and we actually covered 100% of some of these areas, but they were up for auction. So we met far above the threshold for those areas, but the 477 data we'd been submitting every 6 months, as every provider in the room does, was not part of that analysis. And there's areas where funds are not going to be issued because they'll be used to overbuild an existing recipient or a previous recipient. So you see, it's common for our government to honor the fact that they've handed out money to an entity to build broadband in rural America, and because rural America doesn't have the foot traffic, the justification for that food truck, what happens is they don't hand out a second amount of money to that area. And so we're stuck with the pace of broadband development. And in our state, it's hard. In our state, is rather difficult. If our entire population of the state was much more dense, I have a friend of mine in San Francisco. The houses are 4 or 5 feet apart. It's really easy to deliver fiber to the home there. We couldn't do that north of Cheyenne. And these programs can be warped. In the CAF 2 auction, some of the recipients are satellite providers. They charge for overages. They have high latency. They're not great for video and voice. Some of them were, in fact, the FCC last year worked to determine that cellular mobile services or mobile internet was an acceptable form of broadband. I think it's because as a nation, we're a little embarrassed that other nations are bypassing us or surpassing our capabilities. So to summarize, there's programs, but there's catches, and they come with a high amount of administration. So no amount of money is free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And even in the CAF reverse auction, we analyzed it and assigned a certain value to administration. And once the bidding got below a certain point, we figured it didn't even make sense to bid on it because of the administration. Even though some of these areas in Campbell County, Converse County, we covered 100%. And that was frustrating for us. So let's shift over into what you should fund. Let's assume you find a funding source and you're working with the state on this $10 million fund in your community. What should you fund? There's three main components. There's last mile. And what I mean by that is there's a central point in town where fiber converges, and then it's distributed. So let's assume there's fiber to this building, and that fiber goes back to the central point. That's your last mile. It can be last mile within a housing subdivision. It can be last mile within an industrial park, a business park, but it's the last few feet of that network. The second item you should fund is a middle mile component, meaning Rollins to Baggs, Douglas to Casper, Douglas to Cheyenne. Middle mile meaning the transport between these communities. And then the third option is a route diverse middle mile. And what I mean by that is in Wheatland, for instance, you might have a primary route south to Denver, but you also have a northern route to Billings and ultimately to Seattle. So those three components are crucial to building a network. You need a last mile, which is very difficult, hard to roll out from a standpoint of you've got a permitting process and funding and working with the city and working with the county and sticking that infrastructure in the ground. And then you've got the middle mile and then the route diverse middle mile. There are some communities in this state that don't have route diversity at all. They don't have options. So I want to talk now about how we've rolled out broadband. We're a little different company in the fact that we're a competitive local exchange carrier. We're a CLEC. We're not a phone company. We're not a cable company. We're actually a competitive carrier. We're a traditional ISP in the sense that we just rolled out data. That's how we started. We started in the dial-up days. And one of the ways we've gone into certain communities is through the use or the contract value of an anchor tenant. So I want to give you some examples. We went into Torrington and Guernsey for a bank. We went into Pinedale. Torrington's over there apparently. We went into Pinedale for a bank. We went into Green River for a school. We went into Bill for a school. We went into Laramie for a school. Savageton for an oil company. Glen Rock for a hospital. Rolling Hills near Glen Rock for a clinic. Centennial for a cellular company. Hewlett, Saratoga, and Rollins for a cellular company. These are companies that have contracted with us to build those services into the community. And they act as the anchor tenant. They act as the quote-unquote big spender in that community that helps us justify the capital to go into that community. The broadband market is based entirely around anchor tenants. It's based entirely around the need, especially in rural America, to have an anchor tenant on your network that foots the bill for the majority of that construction. The types of anchor tenants that I'm talking about, schools and libraries, number one. There's an E-rate program where your funds are collected from, it's called a Federal Universal Service Charge. It's collected on your cable bill, your cell phone bill, your phone bill, your data bill, and it's paid into a fund, and then the USAC group out of DC actually distributes that to help pay for schools and libraries and whatnot. So the E-rate program actually offsets some of that expense. If the school receives a bid for $2,000, that's the lowest bid, they might only have to pay $800 out of their own pocket. And USAC uses those USF funds to pay the rest. So that's one type of anchor tenant. The other type of anchor tenant is a hospital or clinic. So rural health care, also run by USAC, distributes monies to providers for service to hospitals and clinics and entities of those types in rural markets. And in both those programs, there's a need to have a consultant that helps the entity through that process, and it can't be the provider. And it's a lowest bidder wins situation. But that's the second type of anchor tenant. The third type is cellular companies. I talked about cell phone. I remember back in the day, my brother and I, our parents got tired of us chewing up the phone line at home. So they got us a teenager line. How many of us had teenager lines? Our parents paid for 2 phone lines. I'm paying for 5 at my house. I'm paying for 5 phone lines, not traditional phone lines. I'm paying for 5 cellular, which is voice and data, and my bill's over $300 a month. Cell phone companies have a large amount of spend right now to pay for fiber construction, tower construction, and there's a lot of devices using that technology now. Cars, for instance. The fourth type of anchor tenant is a state, city, county government. And then the fifth type is your large enterprise, your medium to large enterprise, a large manufacturer, a company with over 200 employees or a certain amount of seats or a high amount of data. And so those entities will, I mentioned on my list, there were a few towns we've gone into that were, we went in to service a bank. They identified a need, they wanted to talk to other banks, and in many cases within our network, because we cover such a wide area of Wyoming, it'll span multiple phone companies. It'll span multiple cable companies. And so what I mean by that is the bank might have 10 locations, and 2 of those are in a CenturyLink market, and one's in an RT market, and one's in a Union telephone market. How do they get those networks to talk to each other? And so that's one of the reasons why we've gone in for an anchor tenant is to fulfill a contract to serve them in multiple markets. We do the same thing throughout the Rockies. So picture a school as an anchor tenant on the end of a street, on the west end of the street, and the fiber is on the east end of the street. When a provider is bidding, this is a really simple concept, when they're bidding on the ERIP program to provide service to that school, they identify a certain amount of expense for that fiber run from east to west. And then a provider commonly looks at what they're going to pass. And so a provider has a choice of saying it's going to cost X amount of dollars to serve this school, it's a half-mile away, and that's what their bid is. But another provider might say, I pass 2 other businesses along that path, and there's a good chance I can sell 1 business along that path, and therefore I'll bid lower to the school, because if I get that, I'll just put my best salesman on these 2 businesses to try to grab additional business. And it's a bit of a gamble. So that program, though, I think that was the intent of the program, and that's the way I look at it, is this E-rate program funded fiber builds in the communities, not necessarily just for the schools, just for the libraries, just for the hospitals and clinics, but to pass additional people in town and provide service and drop that to additional businesses. So that's the anchor tenant that I describe is one method of us going into a community. Secondly, we've gone into the community as part of a challenge. And this is a big component of what I want to relate today. At the year end of 2016, I went into my wireless department and I said, I've got $130,000 in capital that we need to spend for tax reasons. What can you do with it? And they responded and said, we can build out 12 communities with that. So 130,000, because we do things with wireless. We do things that can be constructed quickly, can be rolled out quickly, and scaled quickly. And I challenged them. I said, okay, let's spend $130,000 in 12 communities. And we offered service in Albin, Big Piney, Burns, Chugwater, Edgerton, Hillsdale, LaBarge, Lusk, Marbleton, Midwest, Pine Haven, and Weston as a result. This is an example of what you can do with a non-fiber technology. Okay, so we hear a lot about fiber today. And Russ earlier pointed out there are wireless providers in the room. You heard Google talk about wireless as an alternate technology for last mile. We're really big on wireless because we can control that experience. We can control that experience all the way to the customer. We can fix that. We don't have to buy that service from another company. And the fact that we can roll out at just a little over $10,000 a town, that's powerful. We're providing a 50 meg service in those communities with that amount of money. So what I'm going to tell you right now is this is our secret sauce. So keep in mind, I'm opening the kimono here. Wireless can be deployed and scaled up quickly. It's a build it as they come model. Okay, so if you think about fiber, it has to be built before they come. That's why they have services. There's software companies out there that purely focus on encouraging a certain take rate. What's the take rate in this area? Because we need a certain amount of people in your neighborhood to sign up for fiber before we'll build it, right? The issue with that is it technically has to be built before you can put a customer on it, okay? Wireless can be built as the customers come on. It can be deployed quickly. And so this is our secret sauce. If someone were to say, I want to do business against visionary or try the visionary model, this is it. It doesn't require a build. Fiber is the Field of Dreams model. You often hear that in our industry. The Kevin Costner movie, Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will come. That's the way fiber is. That's the way coax is. That's the way copper is. But wireless isn't that way. So we've actually flipped that. When they come, we build it. We just have to be quick about it. But more importantly, anytime in the future where the ROI, or we get the certain amount of foot traffic, again, the food truck analogy, if we get a certain amount of foot traffic in that area, we can roll that customer to a better broadband product in the future. I wouldn't say wireless is the best technology. It's a great technology for expansion. It's a great technology for a stopgap solution. I can provide 50 meg over wireless. I can provide 100. We're testing out millimeter wave, which is 5G, and that's delivering 250 meg right now. The radios are capable of a gig. But that technology has to be refreshed all the time. So we're making the choice as a wireless provider, or primarily wireless provider, to actually refresh that technology from time to time, every 5, 6 years. We have to go out to the house, redo the install, put a new radio up, more capital, more labor, more truck roll. But it's still actually more affordable than fiber. I have the luxury, however, of when Visionary builds a fiber network and delivers service to a community, if we ever decide to say, and we're doing this in 3 communities right now, if we decide to say we're going to build fiber, we can roll that existing customer on an existing contract over to a fiber product, and in turn, build it after they come. And what's important about any technology, wireless especially, cellular, copper, coax, fiber is a component of that. To offer the broadband services that are in demand today and the speeds that everybody wants, you have to have fiber to a certain point. We're starting to build fiber to every tower. We can't just feed those towers in a daisy chain. You often see cellular towers and they're so remote they connect to another tower. That's the way our network was built out in the past. But what we envision now is towers that serve wireless customers in a last mile scenario, small business, residential, fed by fiber. And so we're starting down that path, and that is the future. That's also the future of cellular. That's also the future of cable. That's also the future of copper. Right now, DSL in certain subdivisions are fed by fiber. There's no need to go in and yank out that infrastructure and have the expense of fiber all the way to the home if that copper can deliver a maximum broadband speed. At some point in the future, there will be that crossover. There's going to be another technology. But the bottom line is the fiber construction is so expensive, we've chosen the wireless path. So at this point, you're going to say, Brian, wireless isn't reliable. Last month, Torrington had an outage on their fiber path that they were down for over 2 days. Our network was up. We have a fiber route out of Torrington. We have 3 other microwave routes out of Torrington. We were up. That connectivity east, although it was affected through Nebraska and down, and further on, we had connectivity out of Torrington to Chugwater, Wheatland, and Cheyenne. So the hospital could still process their X-rays. I'm sure they don't have a radiologist on staff. They have someone else do that. Imagine if they didn't have that product. Imagine if they didn't have that option, because Torrington is one of those towns that does not have route diverse middle mile transport. It's coming, but it doesn't have it now. So if you've broken a leg and you show up at the Banner Health in Torrington, and they say, oh, we can't really send your radiology off somewhere. Here's 2 aspirin. I'm not sure you're going to like that. It's going to be a hard pill to swallow to hobble home. My other answer to the question of wireless reliability, every device you hold in your pocket is wireless driven. That's all wireless technology. You think about the drive from Casper to Cheyenne and all those towers along the path to Chugwater. There's PBS on the tower, there's USDA, there's oil field, gas field, there's cellular, there's another cellular, there's another cellular. There was one spot on our drive down, I saw 11 towers, just from my view from I-25. They're going up. These aren't being removed, they're actually going up. Wireless is a crucial component of communication in rural America. I can't emphasize that enough. In fact, it's interesting because Charter, for instance, is actually trialing LTE wireless technology in Los Angeles and New York. They've announced that this year. So for a cable company to adopt a wireless product, that's interesting. Wireless enables us, as Visionary, to have a self-healing mesh network in Cheyenne. I have 3 routes out of Cheyenne using fiber. I lease those from other companies. And then we have a mesh network. So if one route out of Cheyenne to Denver on the old Greeley Highway is down, our network automatically heals and goes another direction. That redundancy and that reliability can be built into the network. So at this point, I would tell you this. Wireless is a fantastic communication tool for rural America, and I said that previously, but I want to emphasize that. In fact, it'll be used, even after fiber is more ubiquitous, it'll be used long after that, is my belief. The third method of us going to the community is educate a guest. We do the homework. We look at the existing customer base on another product, maybe a resold product. In the past, we've resold a lot of DSL and connections on other networks. And we look at it and say, do we want to develop our own broadband product in these communities? There's been some communities where we've never got a return on our investment. There's some communities where we bought a $50,000 food truck and parked it and sold 3 hamburgers, right? We learn from those experiences. And because we're from Wyoming, because our employees are on this, because we see our friends and family at Walmart and people in the community and our mayors and whatnot, we don't just pull out of that community when it doesn't make financial sense. We find a way to make it work. There's some communities where it takes us 5-6 years to reach that threshold of profitability. The fourth method is public-private partnerships, as was said in my introduction. We've gone down the public-private partnership route in Colorado, and it's not a widespread option in Wyoming at this point. I think Powell was a municipal network that's a good example of what can be done. Pinedale and Sublette County have a bid out, and we'll see how that evolves. But in Routt County, Colorado, we connected Steamboat, Hayden, and Craig using route diverse middle mile to Denver. And the 5 anchor tenants in the community, the city, the county, the utility, the hospital, and the schools pooled their resources. So the school took their E-rate and put it in this bucket. And the hospital took their rural health care money and put it in this bucket. And the utility did the same, and the county did the same, the city did the same. And then they built 8 miles of fiber throughout Steamboat. But they didn't want to be an ISP. They just wanted to introduce more options in the community. They wanted to springboard more development. And because they were collectively spending money, they could actually buy a primary route out of Steamboat to the east, and they could buy a backup route or a route diverse middle mile to the west out of Craig. And so they invited us to come in and operate that as their network operator. And so it's our job. We're tasked with not only mapping that, locating the fiber, running the financials, we actually recruit other ISPs to that network. In Pickens County, Colorado, the county completed a series of emergency services towers using grant money from the state of Colorado. And we were invited in to see what we could do with broadband from those 6 towers. So the state had provided a grant program to improve emergency services and first responders within the community, which is Aspen Snowmass. And there's a number of drainages in that area, meaning there's a number of valleys and houses and cabins and whatnot that are miles away from downtown. Because it's easy to do broadband downtown. It's not easy to do that 3 miles up the Roaring Fork drainage. So they invited us to come in, and in that situation, Pickens and Visionary are collectively pooling our funds to build an open access LTE network. So we're attempting to reach those, although there's 17,000 people in that county, we're trying to reach those people that haven't had a good broadband option before. And as we drove as we drove up these drainages, we saw all sorts of satellites on the side of a house. And when I see that, I see Netflix causing overages. That's what I see. So Pickens and Visionary are both contributing capital, and our goal is to serve broadband up those drainages. I'm not trying to provide service to every inhabitant in the county. I'm trying to provide an option to those people that haven't had that before. We were just invited into Rio Blanco County, which is Rangeley and Meeker, Colorado, and they actually spent $14 million on their own network. The county owns it, and they have 2 authorized internet providers. So we're one of those authorized internet providers. We're actually providing just internet services in that community. So that's a different flavor of public-private partnership where they knew that their communities are too small to have 5 or 6 providers. They knew they wanted 2. They identified the ability for 2 providers to have local techs, local offices. If they open it up to more, such as Ammon, Idaho, which is often touted as a success, I would contend that Ammon, Idaho is not a market for ISPs if they have 6 or 7 or 8 ISPs. Rio Blanco was smart. They said what they wanted to. But this is actually a funny story. We were invited to present to Rio Blanco County, And we walked in, we thought we were going to sit down with the county and talk to them and talk to the existing providers and understand what we're getting into and say, this is why we should be selected. It was a full-on county meeting. It was the newspaper was there, the ISPs were there, the guys from the hospital, you know, everybody in the community was interested to hear what we had to say, and we felt a little bit on the spot. And after we made our presentation and they voted us to be a ISP in the network, there was a startup ISP in the room that wanted to, he was local and he wanted to provide service in the community, and he's actually employed full-time at the hospital, and he wanted to be an internet provider in the community and do something for his community. And because he's a startup, that's ultimately why the county leaned our way. But he got up because the county commissioner said, do you want to speak? And he says, yeah, I don't want to see our money go to this big corporate headquarters in Wyoming. And some of you have been in my office next to Subway with our 6 different colors of carpet. It made me think. It made me think as I drove away from that meeting of what I didn't want to be, because I've actually been in that situation where I tell a phone company, I don't want to see my money sent to Denver. So I had a little taste of my own medicine there, and it was humbling. But so anyway, Rio Blanco's been going well, but if you ever make it up to Gillette and you're wanting to stop by our office, we might be down to about 3 colors of carpet by then. This is what makes Visionary different, and I want to talk about that for a second. We grow on cash, and we focus on being a competitor. I would contend we're not a broadband company. I would contend we're a company that drives competition. And what that does for everybody in the state is provide better service, better pricing, more speed. Okay? I can go into a community and I can offer 50 meg over a wireless product, and I can offer 100 meg over a wireless product. And other providers in that community, they have to compete with that. Okay? What's interesting is there's so much opportunity there. What I mean by that is we've been able to go into 94 communities in Wyoming and say, we've got a good option. And it's starting to receive traction, right? Why is that? Because when you have one provider, there's really not a need to sharpen your tool chest, right? There's not a need to keep sharp. When there's 2, there can be a little complacency. When there's 3, it gets interesting. When there's 4, we've gone into communities lately that have 5 or 6 competitors. So I would contend that in Wyoming, and there's people in this room that benefit from this, even though they might not have my services, they're receiving faster services now as a result of me being in that community and what my staff has done in constructing into that community. In other words, your existing provider gets better if we're there. That's what I do for Wyoming. As recently as 5 years ago, we didn't have the guts to expand into new markets. We grew up in the dial-up days, and in the dial-up days when you had one set of modems in Rollins and another provider comes in and says, I've got a set of modems, it's 53K. There's only so much 53K that, what's different? You know, your email might be different, but it's the same experience. So for years we were trained, there's no reason to expand. We can't grab market share. Today we've expanded. We're now in Cheyenne, we're now in Casper. So let's talk about, you want to bring more broadband to town. And when I'm talking to you about this, I'm saying, this applies to me. I need to bring more broadband to town. I need to work with my city, my county. I need to talk about it in the community. Like Russ said this morning, we can't just say, I need better options, or this isn't good enough, and when asked what's good enough, don't have an answer. We have to have an answer, right? We have to talk about this in our communities. If it was minerals, we'd be talking about it years ago, right? Wyoming lives and dies by minerals. But this ethereal plane of technology, everybody grabs onto 2 words, fiber and gigabit, right? What is it really doing for my community? So how do we bring more broadband to our communities, my community as well? I want to discuss Google Fiber. You heard from Google today. When Google asked cities who would work with them, they had over 1,000 cities respond. These are cities, they said, we want you to ease the permitting process. We want you to be faster with letting us have access to your rights of way. And over 1,000 cities said, yeah, we'll do it your way, Google. They hadn't historically done it that way. That's an interesting response. Why is that? Can anyone tell me? Because it's a big name. Brian and Greg Worthen from Visionary, is that a big name? No. No, we don't get that same response. In fact, I've had one situation where a community has fallen over themselves to have us come, and that was Torrington. Ashley, that's your chance to woo again. All right. This is genius on Google's part. If I'm Google and I own YouTube, and I own a search engine, and I own a mapping system, I want everything to get faster. So this is me speculating now. If I'm Google and I have all this advertising money, and you saw what kind of advertising money on the presentation today. If I'm Google and I have all this advertising money and I say, you know what, I want to shake up the market and I want to actually be another entrant, just like I talked about us being a competitor. I want to be another entrant into the marketplace and I want to encourage broadband development. I roll out a fiber service and I say to all the cities, you're going to do it our way. And what's interesting is they did. So Austin, Texas did, Kansas City did. It's interesting to see. But what's most interesting about that is I don't think Google had every intent of serving the whole United States. I think they were wanting to prime the pump. Because if you want YouTube to perform faster and to be shown on a 4K TV, what do? You shame everybody into providing faster services. Before the word gigabit was coined, what did we talk about? I might be able to get my DSL from 7 megs to 12. This is exciting stuff. I believe they were trying to prime the pump. They knew they didn't want to provide fiber in every city. There's a possibility they encouraged phone companies and cable companies to introduce gigabit. And now you heard Governor Meade talk about how many companies in the state of Wyoming are offering gigabit. They primed that pump, and now YouTube performs better as a result. For them, that's a rounding error in their toilet paper budget, Google Fiber. Okay? So I want to talk about my Chugwater story. Troy Babbitt, you here? Troy Babbitt and Bob Nichols met me in Chugwater, and we had modems in Chugwater, and I think we had 90 accounts in Chugwater. So that's dial-up accounts, that's people 30 miles out of town. We own Chugwater, right, from an internet standpoint. This is 2002, 2003. And we had customers call in and they'd say, I can't stay connected. But when they're calling tech support, we can't even hear them. All their phones are staticky. So we're like, what's the problem here? We can't figure it out. So I get a call from Bob Nichols at the state, and he says, we need you to meet us in Chugwater in a meeting. There's a public meeting. I'd never been to a public meeting before. I guess I'm game. So I hop in the car, I drive to Chugwater, and I walk into a room about a fifth of this size with probably 75 people in it. I meet Troy, standing room only. The only thing that's missing is pitchforks and torches, right? And they say, what's wrong with our internet? And I say, well, we do keep it over at the grain elevator, and it's a little dusty over there. Possibly we can move it over somewhere else. And so we determined that the Chugwater Telephone Building and the Chugwater Chili Company are right next to each other. So we work at the Chugwater Chili Company. They trench some copper from their phone office or Chugwater Phone Company to trench copper over to the Chugwater Chili Company. We move our modems over there, and we put new modems in, and we shine them up, and after we install them, the customers have the same problem. The point there is the community was like in revolt because they didn't know the problem. And I learned something that night, and I drove home that night thinking, well, it wasn't us, right? After we installed the modems and whatnot, still had the problem. And ultimately, it was something within the switch at Chugwater Telephone, and they got that cleaned up, and it became a non-issue. And then Chugwater became a local dial to Wheatland, and that was life-changing because then we could have Chugwater customers dial into Wheatland. So this is internet way back in the day. But the point is, I drove away from those two meetings, the meeting and then the modem installation, because I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to actually follow through on what I said I would do. And I said, I don't want to be in this position again. I don't want a community to be so frustrated with what we're doing. But that's what we do. Russ talked about that this morning. We get frustrated. It's not productive. I want to point out that the 1,000 cities that responded to Google didn't sit down in the first meeting with Google and say, my bill's screwed up. Your predecessor promised me X and I got Y. I suppose the money I spend with you goes out of state, as I talked about previously. Or, this is my favorite one, if there's another option, I certainly wouldn't be here meeting with you. This is not how you start out a meeting. This is the pitchforks and torch moment where you have to decide, how is my community going to greet a provider that wants to come to town? Cheyenne greeted Charter with their gigabit announcement in Cheyenne with open arms, right? How is my community, how are your communities going to greet a provider? Are they going to complain about their bill? Are you going to complain about your bill? I mean, what are we trying to produce here? Here's how you attract an internet provider. Show interest. If we identify 2 towns we can go into affordably, and we say, this would be a good market, or we have an economic development office that says, we'd like you to come to this town, or we have an anchor tenant that says, we'd like to come to this town, and we meet with the town, and they show absolutely no interest, and the next town over that we have the same opportunity is totally interested. Which one are we going to spend time with? If you, and when I use word you, if we, within our communities, allow people within the community to coordinate meetings and they don't even do a good job of it, and they can't get people in the same room, how is that provider, I don't care if it's me or anybody else in this room, how is that provider going to see that community? Are they going to see that community as, man, they can't even get the stakeholders in the same room? Am I going to have that same result? What about establishing a community broadband champion? Shouldn't there be someone in the community that knows the previous studies you've paid for and the previous providers you've talked to? What about making the governmental process easier? Isn't that what Google got when they put out their Google Fiber product? Do we do the same in Wyoming? And I'm talking, this is simple. In the city of Gillette, I pay 40 cents a foot a year to use their right-of-way. So 40 cents a foot a year. In Cheyenne, it's $2.50 a foot a year. Let me explain that. If I have to build half a mile of fiber to a business in Gillette, it costs me $1,056 a year. I have to charge that customer $88 a month to receive that fiber in order to pay the city. If that's in Cheyenne, I have to pay $6,600 a year for that half-mile fiber. I have to charge that customer $550 a month. If that customer says, I saw Google Fiber ads when I was in Austin, Texas, and their fiber is $70, and I have to pay $550 a month to the city of Cheyenne, where am I going to build? We need to collectively talk to our communities and say, this is a problem. There needs to be ease of permitting. There needs to be ease of right-of-way. In our state, we don't honor a CLEC license, a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. I have a CLEC license in New Mexico. That means I can go into New Mexico right now and I can go in any right-of-way. I can do the same thing in Utah, Montana, Idaho, Colorado, Washington. I can't do that here. I have to go into every city, and it's an opportunity, don't get me wrong, but I have to go into every city and say, I need to cut a franchise agreement with you, I need to establish a use agreement with you. But when we're faced with something like $250 a foot a year, I can tell you there's more opportunity somewhere else. And that's the frustrating part. We've lived in Wyoming all of our lives, right? We want to do something good for our community. We actually force our employees to use our internet. Because if it's down, we want them to call their friend and say, hey, it's 2 a.m., but this is down. We want you to fix it, right? We want to do right by everybody. We want to roll out a broadband product. Is my wireless product going to be the best thing in Torrington 3 years from now? Maybe not. But it's available now, and it's fast. But there needs to be that community change, because in Wyoming, the cities and municipalities control access to rights of way. They're starting to charge for use of rooftops. And it's going to be our biggest challenge. And I say our because everybody in this room now is a broadband champion. You've attended this meeting today. It's your job to go back to the community and say, what are we doing here? It just isn't the internet, it's cellular. If you can go to one community and you can stream NFL on your phone, you go back home and you can't. Do you see the difference there? To summarize, when the FCC established a CAF 2 to build where CAF 1 did not, and when they established a CAF 3 to build where CAF 2 did not, and they established all these funding mechanisms, it's identifying areas that need to be built in rural America. And it starts at the town level and the county level and then the way out in the Tules level. And that's where we're going to get. And the funds are going to get bigger, But the products change so fast and the technology changes so fast. I guarantee you by the time we install fiber in some communities, we'll have changed out the technology at the home or the business 3 or 4 times. And that's the road we chose. But I don't want to be in a situation where I have to choose to skip over a town to go to another town, or to skip over a Wyoming town to go to a Colorado town. I want to use the food truck analogy. I want every community to see a food truck, to understand what a street taco looks like, or a fancy burger, right? But the community has to work together. Our communities have to work together. Here's what we've learned about ourselves at Visionary. We improve broadband wherever we go through competition. We improve services in communities we live. We are that 4th leg of the Wyoming economy that we want, and that's technology. I think everybody in the room would agree with that. The networks of our future will be hybrids. Cable has a hybrid network. They have part fiber, part coax. The phone company has hybrid networks. They have part fiber, part copper. We have a hybrid network. We have part fiber, part wireless. My view is, and there's many providers in the room we actually lease services from here, we're not afraid to buy from a competitor and to deliver service to that community. In fact, it's equivalent to when my brother and I got some Legos from our mom, and she plunks them down, and we open it up, and it has that big green piece, right? And the first thing you think about when you see that big green piece is, I'm going to build a house. Now, most everybody wants their house to be the same color. What do you do when you run out of the blocks that are all brown or green or whatever color you like? You have to use different colored blocks. Visionary uses different colored blocks to create a house in Wyoming. I'm okay with that. Who wins in the broadband game? The community that works together with providers. They want to improve cellular, they want to improve cable, they want to improve telco, they want to get the stakeholders in the same room, they want everybody to be on the same page, they want to show that they can work with the community. Because I was pretty astonished when Google Fiber came out and said, we're going to do this, and they had 5 times the response that they expected. There's some communities where we're based in, that haven't had that kind of response with me. And so I've got a big job, and some of that requires your help. And the other providers in the room, I'm sure, would say the same thing. They need your help talking about this in your community. The state's done a fantastic job of spending school money and agency money with local providers over the last 4 years. In fact, I would contend that the state awards that we've received have helped us expand at the pace we have. We've expanded, we've even provided service to the most remote areas of the country, west of Wheatland, at the Notch Peak School, one-room schoolhouse, Granite Canyon, we're in Bill, Wyoming. I see a few providers in the room doing the same. The state's spending money with local providers, and it's benefiting everyone in this room. That competition is good. You can thank the state for that. Let's build on those broadband options. I'm excited we have a full-time broadband manager. Welcome, Russ. Very entertaining this morning, thank you. And I'm excited that Endow has identified that broadband's important. I don't want to see a 20-year plan, I want to see a 5-year plan. I have a certain amount of angst, and I want to talk about this. I have a certain amount of, I need to do something better, right? When I was introduced, we actually we took the 2010 census and we took all the places we have coverage in, and we calculated out like 66.4% of Wyoming we can serve. I don't have grand designs of serving everybody in the state. If I grab 10% of that market or 15% of the market, I've done a good job. In the end, I could spend all my time in one community. But we're choosing at Visionary to spend our time in as many places as possible improving service. So I would contend we're doing that in Lusk, which has one fiber route out of town. We have a second route on microwave. I would contend we're doing that in a number of places. In Bill, Wyoming, we have 2 routes that go to 2 different buildings, and so there's redundancy even in Bill, Wyoming on our network. We try to do right by the community, and also because our employees are on the network, we actually install generators and UPS, and we try to build a certain amount of redundancy in there so we don't have to wake up at 3 a.m. to fix something by the time you want to read your news in the morning. So I have a certain amount of, I want to do more. And I think there's a number of providers in the room that would say the same. And there's situations too where there's not that recognition. There's not a single day goes by where a customer calls us and says, my internet's doing great, thanks, right? Nobody calls our internet provider and says that. In fact, I can think of like 3 cards where people have dropped off or mailed to us or taped to the door in my career and said, hey, thanks. Or there was a cut in Sheridan and we were still up on Visionary, thanks, right? It's few and far between. We're in a situation as providers where we're patting ourselves on the back because it just makes us feel good to do what we do. And you don't realize how much everybody in this room wants to do for your community. But it involves that involvement. It involves that grouping of the anchor tenants and the economic development in the city and the county and the school district and the hospital and getting them all in the same room and saying, you can't leave until we determine what's important to this community and what's going to be good for our kids and what's going to be good for our health care and what's going to be good for telehealth in the future. So that's what I've got to say. Are there any questions? Thank you. By the way, I had a PowerPoint, and I hate PowerPoint, so I just winged it. But this is our chance to close early or have a couple questions. I'm happy either way. Sir. We try to do that whenever possible, for sure. There's a couple challenges we face. There's some communities that are so small, their city attorney's a contractor, right? So we can only catch them certain days of the week. And there's some communities that are so large, they're actually seeing franchise fees go away for cable and telephone companies, and they're looking for another revenue source. And so there's many a room we walk into, it's more of it's a chilly reception. So again, we actually simply take a path of which community is receptive, which community has open arms. I know in a number of communities, I've provided copies of other franchise agreements, other use agreements. The city of Idaho Falls, Idaho has a really interesting model, which is ultimately how Gillette patterned theirs after, and I worked closely with them. But that's a lot of conversations, you know, and the bottom line is too, we just finished an election cycle. You think about it from a provider standpoint, how do you build a relationship with a mayor when now there's a new mayor, right? There's a lot of meetings and driving around the state involved with that. But we tried that. We worked with the communities, some communities to do that. We've provided examples, yes. Well, hey, let's go home. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think it goes without saying we certainly appreciate the competitiveness of all the providers in the state of Wyoming. Obviously, we have all benefited to some degree. I'll try to make the closing as brief as possible. I owe everyone a link to our FBI cybersecurity presentation this afternoon. I will work with some of our folks back at ETS to have that on our ets.wyo.gov website as soon as possible, and we'll try and keep it on there for maybe the next month or so for your convenience. Before I go into thank yous, I'd like to remind everyone your badges, if you would please basically recycle those at the front desk, we would certainly appreciate that. They'll get reused at another time. Behind your badge, for those that are going to attend the event this evening, you have 2 drink tickets. So if you don't plan on attending, pile those up and I will sell them to other people later. To close out, I'd certainly like to thank a number of people. First and foremost, the governor. Governor Mead has been a tremendous leader with a huge focus on technology, and that leadership does not go unnoticed and is certainly appreciated. In addition to that, the numerous senators and representatives that have supported technology and their communities, we very much greatly appreciate your efforts, and it certainly doesn't go unnoticed. Cindy Delancey and the Wyoming Business Alliance and Heritage Foundation, thank you for allowing us to co-mingle with the business forum this year. I think it worked out to the benefit of most. On top of that, some specific people that helped make this happen. Emily Sorensen, Patty Walsh, Alan Cummings, Carrie Gernant, the numerous tech directors with the school districts, the Broadband Council, and of course all of the presenters today. Let's please give them all a huge welcome, or excuse me, thank you for their efforts. And with that said, enjoy the rest of your day. See you.